What's up, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Galactic Nerd Outpost. I am your host, Joey McGee, and joining is, of course, once again, Cody Bratch.
Let me talk to you.
And, well, what we're doing today is going to be doing a deeper look at the Hollow Earth. Well, no, not the Hollow Earth. I'm fucking retarded.
Yes, you are.
Kinda. Well, that part of the thing. We're going to be taking a look at Godzilla X Kong New Empire's trailer, which some of you probably are wondering why that's the case, since we did look at a bit in the Godzilla Minus One and Monarch podcast, but that podcast was a little bit stuffed, so not everything went as planned. And if you saw that podcast, well, it's pretty obvious Kaiju Cody didn't get a chance to join, and since I was left with Sosa, I didn't really get much time to I just kind of just wanted to get the trailer done with going through it, since, well, I didn't really have much to bounce off from Sosa, given he's, well, a casual. So,
no disrespect intended to him, of course.
Yeah, exactly. No disrespect at all, but the thing is, I didn't really get much, there wasn't really much to go back and forth on looking at New Empire's trailer with him.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to talking about the New Empire trailer because I had a lot to say about that. I actually had a lot to say about everything, but that we talked about. But because it was all sort of stuffed and we sort of had to move along at a certain pace, I was having a hard time putting my thoughts together on everything. And then, of course, my internet was being a bitch, so I had to I ended up cutting out. Because all of that, I sort of fell into a self-pity party and was like, I'm gonna go cry in a corner now. And I did, and I feel better. And now I'm going to use this particular podcast as redemption.
Yep. Plus, more stuff of Godzilla X Kong has come out alongside, well, a clip of Kong with his glove.
Yep. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty of that and a whole lot more because there's a lot to talk about this movie. Some people don't seem to think so. A lot of people seem to be dismissing it all because it's not Minus One, which I don't think they should do, because since it's not trying to be like Minus One, they're two totally different types of movies. But whatever. To be fair, Minus One is a great movie, but Minus One can be a fun movie in its own right, at least I think.
Yeah, like, they're two different flavors. Like, the Godzilla franchise, like, I know you heard this before, like, it's almost common sense. Godzilla is probably the most versatile franchise to ever exist. It has tackled multiple different types of messages, multiple different types of genres, multiple different types of target demographics. It's done multiple things. Of course, the MonsterVerse, while started as like a mid-Showa era style, it's going more towards starting with Adam Wingard. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, for example, when it came to Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla King of the Monsters was almost like a mid-Showa era film like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. While it had drama, took itself fairly seriously, but also was a little bit out there and wanted to also have fun. Now, that's not to say King of the Monsters is as well made as Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, because let's be real, there's more to criticize about that. But then you had Godzilla versus Kong and what Wingard is pulling off. That seems to be going for the Fukuda era of Godzilla movies, which I'm all for. Though that's not to say there isn't room for improvement in those, because a very common critique of the MonsterVerse, even with major Godzilla fans like myself, is the characters are not great. They're passable for the most part. And for the simplicity of the characters in Godzilla vs. Kong, they're just okay. Like, they have a dynamic, but the Team Godzilla, they're the same as they are from start to finish. You don't feel like they grew fond of each other. You don't feel like any actual friendship was there. They were just working together because of the same motive, and that's how it was from start to finish. And then you had the whole Team Kong thing, which the relationship with Skarsgård's character did change a bit, but there was really no nuance to it. Like, some of Fukuda's movies, the human characters were the main reason to watch, like Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, for example. Like, the monster stuff in that movie is not very good. But it's like, I have heard from test audiences the characters are better in this one, so it's like, hey, that's a good sign.
I do want to talk about the human characters in this movie eventually, but I'm going to save that for when it gets to there, because I have notes, people. Way back in December, okay, that's not way back, but you know what I mean. In December, I did a whole series of Facebook posts talking about my thoughts on the new Empire as they developed. And basically what I'm doing here now is I've worked them all into a series of notes, which is really sort of a script. Sort of like what you did, Joey, for our review of the Monarch season finale. I'm sort of having to do the same thing, because I got specific things that I'm interested in talking about in regards to this movie, and I got a certain order I want to talk about them in, which is why I didn't want to just go through the trailer shot for shot and do it and examine it that way. Okay, no offense meant.
No, not taken. Tokapunk Productions said, was hoping for a roast cast on Dr. Skipper with everyone like Main Man Stan. I was considering that, but here's the thing that went on with Dr. Skipper. Like, it was one of the worst videos I've ever seen of Godzilla. However, I'll give credit when it is due. He did do an apology, and it seemed genuine on his Twitter, so it's like, hey, respect is earned. At the end of the day, he didn't do anything unforgivable. It's still a god-awful take, and he acknowledges that, so it's like, hey, live and learn. Plus, everyone else is already ripping him a new asshole. I watched one video that almost said everything I basically would say in a response to Dr. Skipper, except I'd be a bit more roasty about it. So basically, everyone's already destroyed him for me, and then he's already apologized. So it's like, yeah, it's still an awful video, though.
Yeah, I gotta say, when it comes to that video, I honestly thought that he was intentionally making a crappy take on Godzilla, for clout, for attention on all of that. But surprised to find that he actually does take his video essays seriously. I'm like, I couldn't tell because of how just awful the video was. I only watched the first 2 minutes before I had to turn it off because it was such a bad take. But then I watched a few videos dissecting his further takes. So I'm just like, wow, okay. Basically what it comes from is a place of ignorance and a pre-established stigma about what Godzilla is. He's made it abundantly clear he's not a fan. He doesn't understand Godzilla, or at least that's how it comes across. And he's dealing with absolutes with the character. He, like a lot of people within the fandom itself, have said that that Godzilla has to be the nuclear metaphor, that there always has to be that dark, in-depth allegory and whatnot, and that without that, Godzilla doesn't work. And he even went so far as to say he hates the rest of the Godzilla series and says that the rest sucks ass, which he's wrong about, and he clearly lied when he said that he's watched the rest of the movies, because if he had, he would have known that there are other series entries in this series are just as good and serious as the original Godzilla N Minus One, if not more so, like Shin Godzilla and GMK and so on and so forth. But all I'll say is, when it comes to that take, I thought he came off like an imbecilic, buffoonish moron, and I know he tries to take his video essays seriously as a whole, but I didn't get that with this video here. His really crappy editing doesn't help. Choices of editing in the video didn't help his case either.
Yeah, exactly. And another reason why I felt that he was likely lying about watching the latest Godzilla movies lately is, one, he used the clip from Invasion of the Astro Monster as example of most Godzilla movies are just big monster go burr, which is factually incorrect. And the thing is, Invasion of the Astro Monster, despite that one goofy scene there of him doing the dance, that is the worst example to use because Godzilla has like just over 5 minutes of screen time in that movie, and it takes itself very fucking seriously overall. Like, that wasn't even in the script. Like, if I remember correctly, Haruo Nakajima was just doing that behind the scenes, and then they were like, hey, do that on the film just for the hell of it. Something like
I
that.
think it was like, I think it was actually Eiji Tsuburaya himself who said to do that on screen.
Yeah, Eiji Tsuburaya told him that. So it's like, that wasn't even in the script. That's just a fun little goofy thing they decided to add in a movie that mainly took itself seriously. And then when I decided to stop, like, when he first said Godzilla was public domain, it's like, holy shit, that's the worst character you could say is public domain. Because Toho are assholes. Very protective over Godzilla. But
yeah, there's a lot we could say about that, about that video, but I honestly don't care to say anymore right now because this podcast is supposed to be about a subject I'm far more interested in, something I'm actually looking forward to.
Oh yeah, like, basically, thoughts on the video. It's terrible, Tokupunk. I almost did a response, but the thing is, like I said, he did do a apology on Twitter that seemed pretty sincere. Not to mention everyone else is already ripping it apart for me, so it's like, I don't really get much gain from it at the end of the day. Now, that probably would get me a speed run in subscribers, given how many people want it, but it's like,
I just don't think it deserves the response that it got, only because, well, it's giving the video attention, and bad takes like that really don't deserve any attention.
That is true. That is true. But to be fair, I do a lot of videos roasting bad takes.
And you usually do them very, very well.
I appreciate it. Tokupunk said, "Oh, he took the L. That's nice to hear. I never ever liked his content before, and still don't. I never really watched his content personally because, well, never really had a reason to. But that video was not a good first impression on me. I just went by his other videos in my feed beforehand. But it's like, you know what? Live and learn. We are just talking movies at the end of the day, but it's a factually bad take. He deserved the roasting he got, but it is.
Yeah, that's basically what I thought. It was my first. I never even heard of Dr. Skipper before that video. I watched it. I tried to watch it because Joey suggested a roast podcast. I couldn't watch it, and then when I saw how everyone else reacted, I'm just like, they already did the job for me. So it's like everything everyone else has already said about the video is basically my thoughts on it. So
basically, the only substance me and you could provide at this point is just making fun of him.
Yes, and I kind of already did that with what I implied about him before, but that's neither here nor there.
Yep. But before we go into the trailer, Tokupunk's didn't say anything else. You gotta find something good to do. Do a stream roast like Main Man Stan with everyone. Yeah, I do want to do more of those because I do watch a lot of Mahler and Rags podcast EFAP where they roast a lot of bad videos. So I do want to do more of those in the future, but just like my Deconstructing Insane Nonsense Online videos, I only respond to stuff that I genuinely have something to say about. Like, for example, like a take that I think is genuinely bad and is worth roasting. That's basically how I feel about the whole thing. Like, I've been requested to respond to troll videos on Minus One, terrible troll videos, and I'm never going to respond to them because they don't deserve the attention and it's obvious bait. And I don't respond to takes that just so happen to disagree with mine that are well formed. Like, there was this one guy I watched that did a review bashing on why he thought the monster was poorly done. There was a few oh no moments in there, but for the most part his takes was valid, okay? And so I didn't do a response video to it, even though people wanted me to. Like, I'm not a grifter. I am sincere about what I do, and whenever I do a response video roasting someone, it's because I feel like it's worth it.
Right on.
That said, should we move on to New Empire's trailer?
Yes. I guess according to my notes, I wanted to do my initial impressions. Do you want to do yours too?
Yeah. I'd be down for that.
Who should go first? Should you go first or I go first?
You go first. Like, this podcast is your idea.
Okay, fair enough. Now, not gonna lie, initially the GXK trailer left me underwhelmed. I still thought it had potential to be a lot of fun overall, and parts of it looked really cool, but there were other parts that looked like generic blockbuster fare that could have come from any other big budget American production. Particularly Kong's hand coming up out of the ground in Egypt reminded me of something from those terrible Michael Bay Transformer movies. Love you, Toku Punk. And the last shot with Godzilla and Kong running side by side looked like something from one of them too, or out of the MCU. Also kind of reminded me of the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, how they ended with the heroes running at the camera. You remember that, Joey?
Yeah, I do. Though when it came to that shot, my mother was more reminded by that scene in the old Incredible Hulk TV show when Hulk, I think it was Hulk himself, was running with Thor.
Oh, yeah, I see that. I can see that. But in all the time I was watching it, I just felt like the MonsterVerse had lost its uniqueness and identity of variety. One of my favorite things about the MonsterVerse up to this point was how every entry felt unique amongst the collective series they were a part of. Here, it felt like New Empire had conformed to the bland standards of modern American blockbuster cinema, quote unquote. I don't want the MonsterVerse to lose that sense of versatility and identity, and it felt to me like that was what was happening. But even so, a big part of me still felt like I was probably going to end up loving the movie either way, even with my critiques I had. Despite adding that part in my original Facebook post, I gave people the wrong impression. I know I did when I wrote it down because people kept saying I had been brainwashed or converted or whatever by the glory that is Godzilla Minus One. Now, originally, I was going to refute this, but after thinking about it, I kind of think I was a bit, only because, well, Minus One was so fucking good. It was a fucking great movie. It really was. And it was so different from what the MonsterVerse has been trying to be up to this point. Going from one extreme, the very allegorical, dark, in-depth Godzilla, to the really fun, campy, corny, cheesy Godzilla. It sort of gave me a bit of culture shock, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I get that. When I saw the trailer, I was initially interested, mainly because, well, first, I love Godzilla, I love Kong, I love that they're really taking the goofiness of the MonsterVerse, that Fukuda-era style we've all been talking about, and running with it, no pun intended. And seeing Godzilla and Kong running together, I know it's goofy and kinda cliched, but come on, these are two icons running together. It's badass, and it just excites the little kid in you. At least me speaking. But when it came to, there was some concerns raised, like the visual effects. Like, first when Godzilla comes up and roars, his arms look a little flat, and there's kind of a lack of detail there. And then when Godzilla is running with Kong, as cool as it looked, there was also some bits of jank here and there. But as a whole, as Cody kind of pointed out to me, the recent shots, and some of those shots were actually touched up in recent clips. So it's like, hey, that's good. Now, I know somebody is going to be going like, but why are you comparing the visual effects to something like Minus One when Minus One is using a lot less visual effects than New Empire? Here's the thing. Minus One is on a micro budget. Like, New Empire, the reason Hollywood movies have as much budget as they do is so they can afford to look as realistic as possible while being consistent. When there's a budget there, you're going to have to cut corners. So that's the thing. So if there's a lot of effects flubs in this movie, the fact that they exist
Is a
with
black
that much money. Hey, Zim.
Shalom Shalah.
But the fact that those effects flubs exist in this movie with all that money, it would be a bit concerning because, again, Hollywood movies don't have the excuse for flubs because they have a lot of money. They can afford to make every scene look as spotless as possible. Now, let's say if Toho was making a movie like this, if there was quote unquote special effects flubs and they were inconsistent in areas, I would be forgiving because again, less money and resources. But overall, I am interested. I think it looks fun.
Here's what I have to say about that. A big part of it was, I think, like they were rushing the effects to meet the release deadline. I don't know why they do this, where they announce a release date and then start making the movie. I honestly think it should be the other way around, but whatever. In order to meet these release dates, with big budget movies like these recently, something gets lost in having to try to rush to meet that deadline, like effects feel incomplete and we're not, and that's sort of what I see happening here with this. Because another thing is that a movie like New Empire requires a lot more special effects shots than something like Minus One does, so it's going to require a lot more people working trying to rush it out. And with the way American studios run animation studios, they're kind of like China sweatshops, where the animators are the little kidnapped kids making janky ass shoes.
Yeah, I get that. But that's the thing, like, I hope when it's out they ain't there. Like, I hope it looks as polished as possible when the film is actually out. Because, like I said, when it's a Hollywood movie, so it doesn't really have that excuse. But for the most part, most of the visuals do look really, really good. Just unlike a film like Shin Ultraman or Shin Kamen Rider with lots of special effects, where I was very lenient on those areas. I'm going to be critical here because, again, this is a huge budget movie. Like, they can make it look as consistent as possible.
I thought the effects looked okay for the most part. There's some shots that are definitely on par with the best shots from GVK, and others, not so much. So, yeah, I agree that with the money put into these big budget movie American blockbusters, there shouldn't be that level of inconsistency, but what can you do, you know?
Yeah, but overall, I think the movie looks fun. Before we move on to the trailer, of course. We're going off Cody's notes here, since he was the one with the idea. What's your overall thoughts on New Empire's trailer, Zim?
Generally, the thing that took me out of it the most was obviously the monkey lizard run. That's like the thing that's always gonna take me out of it the most.
That was so cool!
Like, so we'll have to like watch the trailer as you see it, and specifically because now we have a new form for Godzilla. Like, when I see that design, it does not look natural in motion, and we've seen Godzilla run in the MonsterVerse before and it looks fine. And I think they were really trying hard to get like that shot from the trailer, and it almost felt a little too forced. And I guess like generally I'm not exactly the most what's it called? Like
Enthusiastic?
Enthusiastic / like positive about the MonsterVerse recently. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
My stance on the MonsterVerse has been pretty consistent for a while because, like, for example, when I first came out of Godzilla King of the Monsters, I was dumbfounded. I thought it was fantastic. I still love Godzilla King of the Monsters, but there's a lot of problems with that movie. Like, a lot of forced humor, like gonorrhea that's Michael Bay level humor from Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. And then you have some issues that are just kind of thrown in, like the Vera Farmiga's motive makes no sense, and but I love the movie, but it's very flawed. Honestly, in terms of characters, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this, MonsterVerse been at its best with Monarch.
What do you mean? You mean Monarch Legacy of Monsters?
Yes, like in terms of characters, like they actually have nuance and develop, though that's still not perfect, but for MonsterVerse standards.
I think that just also comes from the fact that it's a TV show, so you have more time to develop characters in a TV show versus a movie where you have a single like time and space to create and develop characters. So I'd say like I'd say Monarch Legacy of Monsters maybe has more character work, but it's purely because it has more time to do so, rather than it being like well done and had it been a movie that it would have been the same.
That's fair.
I guess that's fair. I don't entirely agree because I've seen some very poorly developed characters in TV shows. I've seen forced development, and for the most part, the development in Monarch felt natural. Besides certain forced things here and there, like the whole thing with May. She sucked, but
Well, May sucks. Kate sucks.
Kate does not suck.
Kate does suck.
no, she
Does
doesn't.
not.
Yeah, she
Does
does.
not.
No, she doesn't.
She
No,
does.
she doesn't.
No, she
Does
doesn't.
not.
She
No,
does.
she doesn't.
No, she
She's a
doesn't.
terrible
No,
human being.
No, she doesn't.
Y'all are really just there to keep our-
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Mhm.
Nope.
Yep.
You're wrong.
I will 2v1 both of you on this.
You go ahead and have fun being in Wrongsville, sir.
Yeah.
No, I'm just right. Simple
You
as.
wish.
Wrong.
I can gladly bring up all the reasons why she's a terrible character and just a terrible human all around.
But
And I can counter them all, but that's not what this podcast is about.
Well, I mean, like, since we're going off the tangent, what makes her a great character?
have you seen our podcast on Monarch, our podcast episodes?
Mm-mm.
Because basically my stance when it comes to them is they do a lot of quote unquote bad things like cheating and stuff like that. But like let's keep this short since this isn't about Monarch. But for example, I think that's there for nuance. Like I can forgive a person that didn't cheat. That didn't cheat on me, of course, but I can forgive people for cheating in real life. Why can't I do it in fiction? Especially since I think it's art's duty to acknowledge it's a flaw. Like, if they're just doing terrible things and they don't acknowledge it, then, yeah, then that's bad. Like, there's some of the stuff...
It doesn't really acknowledge it all that much. Like, it's highlighted, but not to, like, a huge degree. Not to mention, like, how she treats Kenshiro's family is just completely, like, just, it's not right. It's kind of unforgivable, and you can make the excuse that she's like grieving and that of course like she had those secrets kept from her dad, but like that's not the family's fault, and it just comes across as like a child having a tantrum.
Well, I disagree because at the same time I think it does make sense that someone's going to be like, hey, you cheated on my mother, and is not going to be very happy with them. Like, it's not pleasant to actually see someone do that, but you can empathize with it. That's basically
you can empathize with it. However, also
you have to take into account that this is something. You also have to take into account that this is something that's been building up between her and her dad for a while, and unfortunately, Kantaro's family was just the ones on the receiving end of what she wanted to, how she wanted to be with her dad because of their own strained relationship up to that point. This was sort of the straw that sort of broke the camel's back, and unfortunately, Kentaro's family was in the line of fire.
Yeah,
even if she's in the line of fire, that still makes her look like a terrible person. Like you're making that point for me.
I'm with Cody there, because like I said, like for example, especially since throughout the series, they gradually grow their relationship, like Kentaro and Kate, and it's done with nuance. Like,
well, what would be the nuance then?
Well, the nuance is like, for example, it's not done overnight. Like, some bits of growth in their feelings towards each other as brother and sister start slowly hitting, and then till like a couple episodes later where they actually hug, and then you have the end of final episode where Kentaro clearly cares about her and stuff like that. That would be the nuance.
Well, that's just character work. It would be nuance if like we actually got more about that in terms of their dynamic expressed more. Like it essentially, if they hadn't changed at all and their dynamic was either the same or like it stayed closer to a more static relationship where we had no clue what they were feeling, then it would be very poor character work, but it wouldn't be like nuanced. I wouldn't say like what they did was nuanced.
I guess this is a agree to disagree thing here.
Plus, like also, I think in general, Kentaro as a character is just kind of like essentially the torture puppy of that series.
I will agree with you on one thing in terms of that, and that being the whole thing with May. But I disagree as throughout the series, since way I saw Monarch, and same with Cody here, was I think most of it was about Kate and Kentaro's relationship, and then of course going on to Kurt Russell's character. I forgot the character's name, but he was a really good. Yes,
honestly mostly Monarch is mostly about the story of Shaw, primarily because it's the character they're looking for is someone that Lee cared about and essentially spurred on that character. And then obviously we follow Lee between two different periods, and then the only other character from his old life that actually still reappeared returns because of retcons of a previously established location / part of the universe. And like the biggest payoffs and moments in the show are because of Lee.
I guess, but he's not in the first episode or so.
He may not be in the first, like you could say he's not in the first episode, sure, but like the biggest mover and shaker of the entire series is him.
I guess, but like I said, there's still a lot of character development that goes in with the others, and it's understandable not to like someone for making their mistakes, but to me, that makes it more human, especially since I can forgive someone like the lead character in A Clockwork Orange and empathize with him, even though he done way worse shit in his past.
It's not a matter of how bad a character does it. It's the matter of like how they put that into light when it comes to what the character has done. Like we already see how Kate is with people, and then there's like inklings of what Kate and May are gonna have, and considering the fact that Kentaro is still there as a character, it creates a muddy message, especially if we're trying to say that, oh, what Kate did was wrong, but we really want to emphasize that like maybe this might be a thing. And considering the fact that also a lot of what you see when it comes to like the relationship between May and Kentaro is either Kentaro not being able to do something, or when something happens and May needs to be rescued, it's Kate doing it, which all it does is elevates how we see Kate in our eyes, instead of letting Kentaro and May's relationship have some kind of either development or conclusion to that arc. And sure, we can say probably that there may be some plans for season 2, but overall it's mostly like Kentaro as a character is pushed around for the sake of elevating other characters.
I disagree with that. I'm going to say my final thing here before we move on to Monarch's trailer, because mainly what I'm going off here is, again, like some people could be like that, oh, that he dated May in the past, but at the same time, I don't really think that's her responsibility. Like, I don't know if
what do you mean by it's not her responsibility?
Like if one of my siblings was dating Yumiko Shaku and I had and let's say they broke up, they're no longer a thing anymore, no longer, long in the past, and Yumiko Shaku wanted some of this. I'm sorry, Sonny.
Yeah, but it's not long in the past. Like their relationship isn't like some ancient thing for them.
It's still in the past, but
it's not necessarily. And clearly, from how they do shots of Kentaro looking at May and like how it's framed, it's very clear that he still has some kind of inklings for her.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So it's like clearly the point about it being in the past, I don't think really follows through here. Well, we can do this another time, I think, because obviously it's because obviously we need to get to the new Empire trailer.
Yeah. Okay. But. Yeah, in terms of, let me get the new Empire trailer on. But I do want to say, huh?
Nothing. I was just thinking of something.
Like, I do want to say, like, yeah, he's not over it, but I don't think Kate knows that. Like, it hasn't been brought to her attention yet, and I think it's going to be brought up in, like, a season 2. I can see your issue there, but I don't agree with it. I think what's going on here is she's not realizing that, and May probably doesn't either. But yes,
that just makes it even worse considering her past. But again, neither here nor there.
Yeah. Okay. You said we go to timestamps, right, Cody?
I didn't say shit. I said I didn't want to do a breakdown of the trailer beat by beat.
Oh, I know, but you told me to go to timestamps of what you wanted to talk about.
No, I said I was good. I'm going through my notes about stuff I want to talk about.
Okay. What's first note?
Well, I was saying how the trailer made me feel initially. Now I was going to talk about how I feel now, because I've watched it multiple times since that initial viewing. I will say that my opinion has changed significantly since that first viewing. I've watched the trailer multiple times since that initial viewing, and you know what? The more I watch it, the more it's grown on me. Now I honestly think that GXK, the new Empire, looks like an absolute blast. The monster characters are given great presentation. Most of the imagery shown promises opportunity for great spectacle, as the MonsterVerse always has, and even great world-building potential. The overall visual presentation seems more on point than I initially thought. Only thing I think needs improvement, as you pointed out before, Joey, is that the visual effects need some touch up. And there's another thing about the visual presentation I'm a bit worried about. I'm a little afraid that there might be too many shots of the monsters that don't emphasize the enormity of their size enough to where they might lose their scale and look less like giant monsters and more like Hulk-sized superheroes. I don't mind shots presenting the kaiju on their level here and there, but there also needs to be a good balance of shots that emphasize their gigantic status so it isn't lost. So long as there's a good balance, I think that I can be on board with this movie as what this movie's presenting visually, so long as the character writing and presentation, monster or otherwise, is still done well enough and the story writing is competent enough.
Yeah, like my thoughts are basically the same as they were from the start. Like, I'm glad they are touching up the visual effects according to what you saw recently, and yeah, I basically, since my thoughts are the exact same as they were initially,
there are a few other shots I would hope they work on. There's this one shot in an extended international trailer where Kong gets his monkey gauntlet, I'm calling it, and when he's raising it up, he's lowering his head to get ready, taking a breath for a big roar, and his beard and his chin disappear into his chest, like they actually go through it like something you'd see out of a PS1 video game. I hope they catch that and they work on that too. And like you said about that one shot of Godzilla breaking out of the ice and he throws his arms back, his arms don't really have a whole lot of depth to them. They look like something you'd find on a cardboard cutout. So I hope that they can fix that as much as possible before the movie gets put out. Because with these movies, they're basically I found out recently, they're worked on up until the very day before they get put into theaters. At least that's what I've heard. Yes, that shot.
That makes sense, because, like, for example, I don't know how you feel here, Zim, but is me and Cody crazy here? Like, look at these hands. Look how flat these textures are. His nails look like they came out of Godzilla Unleashed. In fact, the claws look like they're a part of the finger. And there's no muscle stretching here. It looks... Oh, God. What do you think?
I think, like, I'm not sure if these are previs shots and, like, they're going to be worked on later, because if you look at this shot compared to the next shot that's later on, where you see him from, like, above and looking from, like, you're looking below at him roaring, that shot looks so much better than this shot here, which, in my opinion, I think, excuse me, more than likely will have, like, we're just seeing a lot of shots that just weren't finished, having to be put into the trailer, which I'm concerned about, but
Oof.
like, it may just also be tied to, like, how where my feelings are with the design as a whole, so there's that.
My thoughts on the design is this. Like, here's someone who likes the design. This is my favorite design of the MonsterVerse Godzilla, mainly because it has that very creative imagination to it, but this shot looks awful. I will say, yes, the other shot does look great, but the thing is, it's not unheard of for movies to have inconsistent special effects, and if the movie turns out as inconsistent as the trailer, that is there's no excusing that, because, again, as said before, they have a budget. But yeah, this shot looks a lot better. Like, you can tell there's more effort put into this shot. Like, You have the very rough details around his skin.
So badass.
Yeah. The lights going around. You could tell that you could see the lights from his dorsal plates flashing off reflecting off his skin. And here, his arms here, from what we can tell, there's actually some detail here. You can see scales this time. It almost looks like it's from a completely different art piece.
Right on. I guess that will lead into what I wanted to talk about next is Godzilla overall. I wasn't going to start with the design. I was actually going to talk about the change in Godzilla and Kong's dynamic, where in the last movie, it's like, fuck you, bro. No, fuck you, bro. Fight me, bro. Oh, I'll fight you, bro. And now in New Empire, it's like, people, let me tell you about my best friend. I
Pretty much.
I don't mind that change in dynamic, as we've already seen them as enemies in a movie already. Technically, too, if you count the original 1962 movie, although that's not part of the MonsterVerse. I welcome them being allies, since it's something that hasn't been done with these two specific characters before in the MonsterVerse or anywhere else, as far as they know, outside of fan fiction. And a little glimpse at the end of GVK where they were fighting Mechagodzilla together.
Yeah, and which that was a really cool thing there, because we had the kaiju fighting. We got our fight with Godzilla and Kong, and while there was one janking moment, like when they picked up Mechagodzilla together, there wasn't any weight. I think everyone was excited to be like, yes, these two icons are now working together, and now we get a movie dedicated to that. Which, is it silly? Yes, but it's no more silly than, again, the Showa era films, I mean late Showa era films, it's trying to replicate from Jun Fukuda. Like, I see this the same way I see as Godzilla working with Anguirus and such. Just, it's Godzilla and Kong.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's not uncommon in the Godzilla series for Godzilla to be an enemy with a monster in one movie and then being friends with them in the next. We see it between him and Mothra, from Mothra versus Godzilla to Ghidorah the three-headed monster. Then, and in Ghidorah the three-headed monster, it starts off with Godzilla and Rodan being enemies and then becoming allies at the end, sort of like what happens with Godzilla and Kong and GVK. And then they're full-blown allies in Invasion of Monster Zero. And then, like you said, him and Anguirus become friends, well, quote-unquote friends, in Godzilla vs. Gigan, leading to many, many fan fictions about them being, quote-unquote, best friends. Y'all know who you are, you nasty people. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
So, don't be getting hypocritical on me now, G-fans. It's a classic dynamic and trope that's been in the Godzilla franchise for decades. People who praise it in the Showa series have absolutely no right complaining about it in this movie. None at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. Like, it's just a hit. If anything, it hits extra hard here because it's, again, we got two of the most iconic movie monsters working side by side, and two of the most impactful as well.
Right on, right on. Now, I will say, based on how the trailer presents them, I assume that Godzilla and Kong are going to end up palling around somewhere near the beginning of the final act, if not the middle. I think that, for the most part, they'll be separate with their own stories being told individually until the end, when they come together right now. But I also think that, I do think Kong's story will overshadow Godzilla's a bit, since he's basically been lined up to be the actual protagonist of the MonsterVerse going forward, with Godzilla in a supporting role. Basically, if Kong is Goku, then Godzilla is either Piccolo or Vegeta in that regard. Not my favorite idea in the world, since I'm more of a Godzilla fan, but so long as it's well executed and satisfying to some extent, then I'll be good.
Yeah, because we'll get more into this soon, but it's like, this is, again, I feel like Wingard is trying to be the modern Jun Fukuda, and going off Godzilla vs. Kong, he didn't do bad at it. It's just messy pacing, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a cool little dynamic, and it's like, it takes you back to the Showa era. Now, maybe they're not trying to replicate the Showa era here. Like, maybe they're just trying generic Hollywood blockbuster. But here's
or
the
maybe
thing.
both.
Yeah, or both. But the thing is, as the consumer, we can only really interpret what we think the artist's intentions are, and I believe that they are trying to replicate the Fukuda era because there is a lot of that vibe here. Now, I won't say Wingard's work has been as good as some of Jun Fukuda's best.
Oh, in terms of story and character, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, some of Fukuda's movies, the characters were the main reason to watch, particularly Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, because the monster action in that movie was not very good.
I didn't think so either, but it was serviceable.
Yeah, just the characters were fun and had nuance to them.
Yeah. I still can't believe because scene of Godzilla fighting planes while to surfer rock music in the background. I'm just like,
that was very poorly added because it just did not. It's funny. I'm glad it's there in a personal sense because it adds a goofy charm to it. But objectively speaking, it does not work.
it doesn't, but that makes it even funnier to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like Robert Scott's running in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, or the "Take That, You Dinosaur." Like, it's terrible. Those scenes objectively do not work within the movie, but I'm glad they're there because they're so fucking funny and entertaining.
Right on. So, sorry for that little tangent. I guess now we can go back to Godzilla's overall design. Zim, do you have any other critiques of the design that you personally want to get out?
So I think generally I've already talked about how the waist looks super pinched and then the upper chest. Actually, you mind if you can just leave the that shot right up there for me?
Okay, let me
Yeah.
This one's the Godzilla running Kong.
Yeah. Yeah, just overall, it looks super pinched in the shot here, and because of that, the shot of him running looks really weird, and it almost looks like there's something wrong with the model in and of itself. When I'm looking at the design and like the toy forms, I thought maybe it might just be like the CGI. And I was like, oh, maybe if I see like front of the toys, it's not gonna be that bad. But then when I look at the toys, I still see like the extremely long arms, but they're also still super lanky, and the legs are also a lot more thinner with the chest really bulked up. But it doesn't look like bulked up in the definition of seeing someone with like a super large muscular chest. It looks like there's just a lot of bloat in his upper body in that sense. Then obviously the tail is essentially, in terms of how I'm seeing it with the toys, it's either the tail shrunk or the tail is the same size, but there's just the addition of the extra larger spines and then the thagomizers at the end. So like my issue with it primarily is that they pinch the design in so many different ways to where it looks really unnatural. And I think that if we wanted to have like the first true Godzilla and Kong team up movie, it would have made more sense from my perspective that instead of trying to like find a new gimmick for Godzilla and like a new gimmick for Kong, it would be having the two like distinct and recognizable versions of the character working together for a whole movie. And I think overall that would cement like how they are further, because obviously when we think of like Godzilla and Kong, I think probably more people are going to remember the GVK designs and that GVK dynamic versus this dynamic here, because more than likely, if the leaks are true, the Power Glove's not going to last, because that's a I'm not going to get into too many spoilers, but there's a reason why that's going to be there, and that's probably not going to last for him. And unless the evolved form is going to be what Godzilla's going to look like for the rest of the series, I think more than likely he's either going to look different than film following this, or they may strip down a few elements of the evolved design and have this kind of be what Godzilla looks like for the rest of the series. And I think that I had issues with, like, for example, the 2014 design in a few areas, but I think combining that design with the King of the Monsters design, I think would have been really nice, because we would have had a consistent design for the most part throughout all the films. And I just think it's just an interesting departure from the rest of the Godzilla designs that we've seen so far.
I get that. Like, I do agree with you on the waist thing. Like, that is a issue I have with the design, and particularly shots like this. Just what really makes the design work for me is, one, I love the crystallization of the dorsal fins, the colorization that comes with it. You know, I'm a Space Godzilla guy. Like, But and also I overall like the colors of eyes and how they did tweak it to make it somewhat unique. I'm a sucker for that type of originality, but it's not a perfect design because I do agree the proportions around the lower body can be a tad bit odd.
Yeah, I mean,
Am
like,
I?
also speaking to the spines, like, overall, his color scheme hasn't changed. The only difference being that now there's like color in his spines, which I know a lot of people are gonna be like, well, Godzilla's always had color in his spines too. However, it's far more of a contrasting color of like gray to almost black skin with the spines being white with like the darker, more skin color in the center to highlight it. And I think that usually worked really well. Or in a lot of cases, the spine color was usually the same as the skin color. The only time that we actually saw a color design that was similar to this Godzilla here would be 2000, which is what a lot of people are comparing it to. However, in this case, Godzilla wasn't like the charcoal gray color that we see for the MonsterVerse design or a lot of other designs. It was a green, and green with pink and purple is far more complementary in terms of color theory than like dark gray, earthy brown, and then very, very vibrant pink. I think that in terms of like how the colors were done here, just wasn't necessarily the best.
I can understand that. I can understand that.
Right on, right on. For
Like,
me,
I think probably like even for viewers, I know some of y'all are people who do follow my streams. I think either like in a stream or two, depending on how long it takes me, I might do a redesign of how I would do the evolved form, just so like people can have an understanding as to like what it is I would have done if I had to do similar things, such as like making him thinner and like giving him different colored spines and the like, because I think that it can work. I just don't think it was needed at this time. Personally, I do like, however, that he now has color in his eyes. I think that it makes the eyes stand out a lot, and it can provide extra emotive character to Godzilla. I think that's like a good decision. But then I think the rest of the things they did with the body just don't work. And this is going back further to the like my dispute with the running scene. I think that it shows not only the like the weirdness with the model, because Kong looks fine for the most part. It's just he's got the power glove. But I think that had we gotten a more traditional Godzilla, I would have scrapped the running sequence, even though we've seen the Kodum Godzilla run, and just have like maybe a zoom in shot to make these two look really giant and just like roaring at the camera for that really, oh wow, this is
that
an
could have been
awesome shot of the
cool.
trailer. Because like it accomplishes the same thing without like having this weird uncanny vibe to it. Because like I know you mentioned, Cody, that you're concerned about scale, and I think that like had we done something similar to get that oh wow shot but kept the scale but also kept a more traditional Godzilla, I think a lot of people would have been much more happy with something in the trailer. Like even you can even still have the two like crawling out of the ground, but then just have like a nice standoff shot. But that's just my opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I can get that. I can get that.
Yeah, what you said there at the end about an alternate shot of them of the whole team up shot, that actually made a lot of sense, and I could get behind that idea too.
Because like
Yeah.
I don't even, I think that like if we're gonna have the two running, I know some people don't really like the movie, but King of the Monsters does do running pretty well with those with the King Ghidorah and Godzilla running, and it really does, it has a lot more mass to it than I'd say this shot does with them running. And I think that if we have to have them run, save it for like in the movie instead of kind of showcasing it in the trailer, because this was not, in my opinion, the best foot forward.
I guess not, and I can agree with you. I do believe that initial shot from King of the Monsters of Godzilla charging at Ghidorah during the final showdown was probably the best handling of Godzilla running, not just in the MonsterVerse, but ever. I honestly think it was more well handled than in GVK or any of the other Godzilla movies personally, because, like you said, it was able to add a new dynamic to Godzilla, or at least the MonsterVerse version, while still retaining the mass and scale that helps make kaiju so special because they're so damn big.
Now, I will say one of the things I do love about this design is due to him having this very colorful aesthetic, when he fires his atomic breath, it causes lights to go out everywhere, including his eyes, his mouth. It's a very unique direction for Godzilla, and the only Godzilla this necessarily reminds me of here, like in terms of the eyes, it's I was thinking that kind of happened in the '98 Godzilla TV show, and
Yeah.
then with his body entirely lighting up, that's a lot like Shin. So it's like, hey, this is a cool.
Well, with Shin, it wasn't completely his body lighting up. It was more like his back and then crevices in his skin lit up because it wasn't like almost this kind of feels more like how they showed in the trailers. It's almost more like a DBZ key blast in the sense where you have like the aura and then you have the breath. I do have to say, if there's one thing I do like about the MonsterVerse Godzillas post 2014, I like the idea of Godzilla's eyes glowing when he fires up his atomic breath. So like you see the spines glow, but then his eyes glow the same color and then he shoots.
I would say that should be saved for like an especially powerful atomic breath as a way to emphasize that this isn't your typical atomic breath.
Yeah,
I guess, but like I would say to counter that, we have seen stronger versions of the atomic breath that weren't different colors, for example, because in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, you do see Godzilla use a spiral beam, but it's a just blue spiral beam with extra electricity added to it. So you can still play around with the aesthetics of how a stronger beam works, but keep it in the confines of how the beams are traditionally fired, because Godzilla's eyes don't glow in that. And the really only difference is the color of the beam to a degree, the extra spiraling, and then the electricity from like you see sparking off his back as he fires it. So that would be my thoughts. I'd say
that's fair.
Like actually, one sec. If this loads properly, I'm gonna send it to Joey as well because I just saw someone do some variations of the evolved state, but in a few different colors. And I think, like, honestly, this evolved state looks so much better if it was like orange. And if we're gonna like compare it to 2000, 2000 did a really good job with an orange breath, and I think Legendary could definitely do something cool with that, especially since like the most powerful state we saw Godzilla in at this point was the burning form, which was orange instead of just regular blue. I just sent it to you on Discord.
Okay, I'll showcase it on the screen.
Yeah,
it does look pretty cool. Okay, give me a second. I gotta say, I do really like this. I do think, personally, like, I think they all have somewhat of their own coolness to them, but orange does give it more of a somewhat classic. It's weird to say 2000 is old, but it fucking is. Gives a somewhat classic aesthetic to it around the character, and definitely brings back the Millennium vibe. I don't know what it is, but 2014's design, starting with 2014, of course, always kind of reminded me of the Millennium Godzilla. I don't know what it is. I don't think there's any objective merit behind it. Just something about how he's designed and shaped.
Are you talking about 2000?
Yeah, something about it. I don't know what that is.
Well, it's a very radical design, but it keeps it very consistent with how Godzilla is traditionally shaped. Like I would say, the face is like more angular than the Heisei designs, but again, it's still very classic. The body closer to Heisei, somewhat kind of like not super Showa-y, but it's still traditional. The skin not traditional, but color wise, but overall the textures and stuff are still more traditional. The spines are definitely not traditional, but they still kind of fit within the idea of like the pronged leaf shape. But because you're looking for more jagged edges, you see his skin being a little bit more jagged, plus the idea of having green contrasted with the purple allows for a good blending of like two colors you wouldn't expect on Godzilla, but in a way that works well.
I think personally, like, all of these look great in their own right, but for consistency, since it, like, for example, I think blue would probably fit the best simply because that is the established atomic breath of the MonsterVerse Godzilla. Now, again, since this represents a different type of radiation they're using, I can't really criticize that.
We don't know just yet. Are you talking about like in the sense where Godzilla's power comes from is different?
Yeah.
So then that's why the color's different?
Yeah.
Sure. I just sent you how it looks blue. I think like honestly they probably didn't want to go for blue because they wanted to have Godzilla popping out of the ice. And if you look at the blue recolor here, there's such a like huge blend.
Okay, let me put that on the screen. Okay, because 1 minute, my computer's a bit slow. If I sound a bit frustrated at points, it's because my computer's fighting me.
It's okay. Now you know how I feel about you.
You're all slow speds to me.
Like this one I think works perfectly, mainly because this is the established color from the MonsterVerse movies. And it would make sense that once he evolved, that blue color would begin to take over.
I'd say that's fair too. I would still argue that the strongest form was still orange with burning, but I could see your points. I'm also going from the sense that if we have to change the color, then I think orange would have been the best choice versus a like color like pink or like purple or yellow or anything.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
I do get your point too, but it's like if I was designing it, it would be blue since it's consistent with the rest of the MonsterVerse movies.
Yeah, no, I get your I can argue that I can argue both of those points just fine. However, actually speaking of another thing too, is that I sent you just another picture here for all the Funkos. And what's least interesting to me is that it very much feels like, and we can tell with all the merchandise, this design was meant to be toyified. And what's funny is that the Funko version of Evolved Godzilla, proportion wise, actually doesn't look too bad here, at least. But like when it looks at the model, it looks really bad. Even like with other toys, it looks really bad.
I'd say if we're going only off this Funko, I'd say it looks great because
it doesn't look that bad here when it's in a Funko. But if you look at more accurate toys that are supposed to be like more like 1-to-1s of the actual design, it does not look good.
In my opinion, the toys, or at least the Playmate stuff, has never really done the MonsterVerse designs all that much justice anyways. So
I would say like some of them haven't, but like I know like the King of the Monsters Playmate stuff wasn't that bad in terms of how they had designed their Godzilla toys. Like they weren't like toys I'd want to pick up myself and buy, but like if I wanted to give like a cheap Godzilla toy to like a younger sibling or like a cousin or someone, I wouldn't mind that. Like they aren't the worst.
I would say that's like, the best.
No, go. You're good. Because I'm looking for a picture.
Oh, I was gonna say, I would say so far that the best MonsterVerse toys from Playmates thus far was their Rodan, and they've done really good. They've been really good to Kong, let's say.
I mean, Kong is not hard to do, honestly, in terms of like a toy, as well as like modeling him as a character.
He's a very simple kaiju.
He's being just a giant ape. It's not hard to get Kong wrong. That's kind of a lie. You can make ugly Kongs, but like toy-wise, if you're just following a previously done design, then it's pretty easy to get a 1-to-1.
Let me get some of the things on.
Show off like the Playmates Evolved toy, and then show off the Playmates GVK Godzilla.
Now, I will say, I think this toy is not a good display of it, because I will say, like, not a perfect display, because the movie, some of this shows off in the film too, but I think the Playmate figure makes it look worse than it actually is. Mainly because this was the first time I've ever seen this incarnation of Godzilla. I was playing Halo 3 ODST with Abyss Kaiser, or what he goes by now, Meatbag. I saw this. Everyone was telling me how awful it looked. It's like, yeah, this is very poorly proportioned. And it's like, that's still somewhat in the movie, but I did find myself a little bit more pleased with how it turned out, because I don't think he's this skinny right here from the waist down. At least I've seen nothing from the trailer that exactly shown him to be this level of top heavy, but I could be wrong.
That's the thing, is that it feels like it probably is that way because of how weird the model looks when it's moving, because the waist really tapers, and like the thing I noticed the most was how weird his legs look when he's moving, and I think that is probably a product of the actual model looking kind of like that.
It's possible. Now, I will say
Because
Personally,
I just showed you
I don't.
I showed you a fan art piece, Joey, that of like someone drawing Evolved Godzilla, and I think they beef him up a little bit in their fan art. And I think like if that's what he had looked like, he would have looked a lot better. I still would have probably argued against the pink, but
Let's show off the fan art. But finish,
yeah.
Cody.
I was gonna say that I personally don't have a problem with how he looks running, or at least how the legs look. I thought they looked fine. I will agree that he looked a little weird. Oh, I love that art
Yeah,
piece. That's so fucking cool.
Because if
But
you see, like his arms are still long, but they're a lot more muscular, and it looks like his legs are still bigger without making them super like limber and lean. And although you can see there's that dark midsection there where his chest and then like his crotchal area is, but I think like it overall gives a more menacing and bigger shape to the evolved form rather than like what it feels like, which is a little very like thin and skinny look to Godzilla.
Yeah, but I think I could be wrong. But from what we've seen in the movie, I actually don't think this art is very off on the proportions. Because even here, like, there's still a little bit of that slimness in between the stomach. But the thing is, the trailer only allowed us to see certain angles of this Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not too sure, but I don't think this art might be that far off. This might be close to what we actually get on the screen.
Yeah.
But if the Playmate figure turns out to be an accurate representation for the rest of the movie, God help us. If this turns out to be accurate, let's celebrate.
Yeah, if this is closer to what the design actually looks like in the movie, I'd probably be like, wow, those shots did not do the design justice. But if it's closer more to the toys, then yeah, my points still stand.
well, you're always going to. It also depends on how you shoot Godzilla, because there can be angles that make him look a bit janky. Because I remember when 2014 was first coming out, there was this image of a statue that was going around, and depending on what point of view you looked at the statue at, it either looked really cool or really off-putting. So that's another part of what I mean when I say visual presentation.
That's fair. But let's go to the other figure that you sent. I think I actually have this figure.
Yeah, I don't own any of the Playmates figures for reference, but I remember seeing them a lot.
I didn't buy it, but it was given to me.
Yeah, like even here, this looks pretty close to what GVK Godzilla looked like, and that's why I'm thinking it's going to be closer to the toys since they have not been too like off with their sculpts, even though they are like far more like cheaper figures.
That's fair. That's fair. Which to make it clear, I didn't buy this. The Playmate stuff I got as a gift, but I do like what I have, particularly the Jet Jaguar. Like, I'm actually so happy with that Jet Jaguar I got. I don't even know if I want to get the monster art, but at the same time, Jet Jaguar is a very, very simple design. So,
yeah, it's not hard to do a jet sculpt. Good.
But we off about the Godzilla design?
I actually haven't really gotten to give my thoughts on the design. I was just letting Zim go first because I didn't want to be a dick.
Let's hear your thoughts.
I actually really like the design. I've never had a problem with it. I think it looks cool personally. I still think Godzilla looks mighty and powerful, and it keeps most of the same basic aesthetics of what made legendary Godzilla so special, while still allowing Adam Wingard to put his own spin on the design, just like everyone else who has used the design so far has gotten to do. He didn't do it in GVK because he said, in his own words, he wanted a sense of continuity going from King of the Monsters into GVK. Too bad that same need for continuity didn't exist in other aspects of the movie, but whatever. But still, he didn't have to do that, but I'm glad he did. I'm glad we got to keep that version of the legendary design a bit longer, even though Adam didn't have to. I appreciate they did, because that's honestly my favorite Godzilla design, period. The King of the Monsters design. That's my boy, personally. But at the same time, I understand the need for creative expression through the piece of media you're trying to make. So I made peace with the fact that that version of the design is pretty much going to be done with after this movie. Helps that, again, I like this design so much. things.
I also want to say when it comes to this design, like, I don't think the previous MonsterVerse films have established he evolved yet, but when you watch the movies, his design does gradually change throughout the course of the series, starting with Godzilla 2014, the King of the Monsters. Then you had, in Godzilla X Kong, there wasn't much difference, but you can see in his face some difference, but that's more due to him being very expressive rather than an actual change. So the fact here we're getting a drastically evolved form, what it does is it also adds an explanation for why he looks different throughout the movies. It creates a continuity reason for why there's change. So
I guess
in universe reason, you mean?
Yeah, well, a on-screen reason because it's
Rather than
another
an
thing I have
artistic
against
license.
Legacy of Monsters is the fact that since what they do ends up contradicting what happens in Aftershock and Awakening, we had a reason as to why he looked different between King of the Monsters and 2014.
I think it's safe to say that those comic books are out of continuity.
Well, they're out of continuity, I guess now, but like they were always mentioned as being in continuity by both the directors and the people working on the comics themselves. And I guess like now they're just doing a new on-screen reason as to why we saw changes. And I guess the question now becomes how exactly does this evolution work versus the other ones, since obviously Godzilla had changed. If they're gonna say Godzilla looked different from film to film because he was evolving, what caused such a dramatic evolution in this case here? But we'll probably be given a reason more than likely because
I have a reason. The first of all, the pink in Godzilla here, I'm fine with because of the actual thought that went into it. Because it's not actually pink, or at least it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to represent ultraviolet gamma radiation, which, from what I understand, is supposed to represent radiation at its most powerful. And some people would say, well, Godzilla shouldn't be able to sustain such power, but I think part of the adaptive process of his evolutions is to adapt his body to be able to handle those kind of changes, so that he doesn't end up almost blowing up like what almost ended up happening at the end of King of the Monsters. So there is a in-universe reason for why he might need to evolve.
Yeah, like, and the fact that there's actually hints throughout the series, I think good writing will establish, which that does seem to be what's happening here, why all this been occurring, rather than, oh yeah, he looks different, like, forget what he looked like in the other movie. And I like that. Like, that is smart writing there, because again, context when it comes to execution, context and consistency are key. And when something changes, context is what matters. And there seems to be a lot of that here.
I will say, I wish they had put that same level of thought into other aspects of the MonsterVerse, but what can you do? And I also gotta say, from this shot right here, I fucking love the little details they put into Godzilla, including giving him a bearded lizard-like spike beard on his chin and the spikes around his eyes and whatnot. He looks fucking badass.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I also think that in future movies, if there are any, I don't know if there will be or not, I do think that the normal texture, the normal material that Godzilla's spines are made of might grow over these more fleshy, transparent pink spines, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I think the only issue I have with the shot is that it looks like he snapped his neck when he did this, because it has a really tight angle on his neck there, which it almost feels like part of his head's disappearing into his neck, similar to Kong and like his fur and his beard.
Huh.
You know, I didn't notice that till you mentioned it, but you're right.
Shit, you really are right.
But that's why I say if they don't touch these ups within the movie, stuff like that would be forgivable with a budget of Godzilla Minus One if it was trying to do this. But with a multi-million-dollar Hollywood blockbuster, no. I don't care how much visual
And the issue
effects
always comes is that like a lot of people will always like wonder like what the deal is if the shot is like cool. Outside of the fact that like we can identify the issue with the shot, you can still get a similar angle without like compromising the anatomy of the monster.
Yeah.
Because one sec, I'm gonna fire something up just so like if people who are like curious as to what I mean can understand that in better detail. But when it pops up and I can show it off, I'll let you know.
Okay.
No one wants to see your penis, them.
Fucking A.
Hey,
Just
you
his
gay
erected
one who
cock
wanted
to
to
the
think
world.
about it. Again, I ain't thinking about it. Clearly you are. How much you love it, apparently.
Ugh.
Hey, you're the one who keeps shoving it down my throat while Cody watches.
That has never happened. I think that you, sir, have some kind of weird fantasy about it. So
Could
that
you
sounds
please
like
not put
my
us in your
favorite.
fantasies?
Hey, I'm trying, but this is Joey's thing. But yeah, actually, I should be able to show off what I'm referring to now. Let me share my screen. Sec, present, share screen. Okay. Let me know when you can see the screen. So obviously I've got like my own character model here. And if you look at that shot, I'm just gonna rotate it a little bit here. When you rotate it up like that, it like almost, let me see if I can keep doing it. Yeah, it almost looks like he's turning like this to look at the camera, which obviously, if you look at the model here, that's not going to fare very well for the Godzilla head. So actually, yeah, right there. So let me just stop the bones and let me get closer. Oh, too close. Yeah, it's that shot. Like the shot almost looks like he's doing this right here. But if you look at how I had to construe the model, it looks really just wonk. Right.
Yeah, like they could have touched that up now that you mention it. Maybe they will in the film, but still, as D-Man pointed out, the trailers we got of Godzilla King of the Monsters and GVK didn't look much different than what we actually got on the film. So that is a tad concerning. By the way, cool model you got there.
Thanks. I had someone commission it, so for people who watch my shit, stick around because there's gonna be more stuff with these kinds of models in the very hopefully near future, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah. But it's like, yeah, I see what you mean there, because me and Cody originally did not realize that, but hey, that's the cool thing about discussing art. You can learn something you didn't notice before.
Most definitely. I will say it's a shame that no one else on working in the movie thought of that, but it's not a big thing in the long run, at least not to me. But if you do have a few little holes in the dam like that, eventually it's going to add up. So
yeah, I guess it's sort of like when you do that, it's I understand wanting to get that shot, but I think that overall you can accomplish this without making what feels like very amateur mistakes. Like even though like my model is far more simple than this thing right here, I think that like the concepts of animation are still going to apply to like something, whether it is like big budget animation or like whatever it is I want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, and Tokapunk Productions said Zim gonna make $50K. You mean $50K?
I wish I could make $50K, or hey, 50K subs. I'll take 50K subs as well. The things I could do with 50K. Oh man.
You can join the streets and maybe you'll make some.
Woof.
Yeah, Joey, I don't need to hear about what it is that you do to make money.
No, I'm offering to pay you.
What?
Again, bro, your inclinations are showing. It ain't my thing. That's your thing.
This is the gayest podcast on the planet, and I'm proud of it.
Oof.
Yeah. Joey has now joined the Pride Parade.
Yeah, you did too. This is the gay show here. Everyone here, you're coming with me.
I guess you could say that all you did was trap me.
Trap. I got it.
There you go.
All that matters to them is I consent. That's how the law works. I don't make the rules.
Okay, I'm going to go back to talking about things I like about the design. Originally, I also thought the longer arms were a little bit awkward, but since they look awkward on the toys still, no doubt about that. But in that particular shot, they don't bother me personally, but I understand why they bother use them. I also could have done without the elbow spikes, only because that further solidifies legendary Godzilla, quote unquote, borrowing stuff from Heisei Gamera. Up to this point, I've argued that the similarities are superficial at best, but now seeing Godzilla get Gamera's shoulder spikes, I'm like, do you guys realize what you're doing? I think they might.
I mean,
not against
like this is actually probably technically like one of the later Godzillas to get elbow spiky things. I will even say that like even though Gamera had them in his Heisei films, I think that I wouldn't consider the elbow spikes to be an exclusively Gamera type design element. But
I know it's
like,
just that when I saw that,
no, I get it.
when I saw that, I instantly thought Gamera, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to help the argument people have been making about the fact that Legendary Godzilla is basically a Heisei Gamera reskin or whatever it's called.
No, I get. I get what you're trying to say.
People who say it's a reskin of Heisei Gamera, let's be honest, comparing any MonsterVerse to the Heisei Gamera in any sense is wrong.
Oh, I agree. The similarities are there, but they're superficial at best, I've said up to this point. And despite these elbow spikes not helping my argument, I'll still say they're superficial, and I'll die on this hill.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Oh, I also like what they did with the tail spikes. It's a new dynamic to Godzilla that hasn't been done before, and I'm looking forward to him actually using that to tail whip a motherfucker.
Yeah, I think that if they added those spines there on the back of his tail, he's probably going to use them in the film.
Fuck yeah.
I do think that if I had to add something spiny to Godzilla's tail, if I had to, I'd probably do something. Cody, do you play Monster Hunter?
No, but I've heard of it. I watched the
the
movie that nobody liked.
What's it called? You know the monster Glavenus?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if I was gonna give Godzilla like a bladed tail or something, I'd probably do something similar to Glavenus instead of like spikes. And for people who do not know, I'll actually send Joey a Glavenus picture, and y'all can kind of imagine how that would look on a Godzilla design like made for it.
Well, that's certainly an inventive out of the box look for it. I wouldn't be opposed to them doing something like that in a future design. Hell, Toho might do it before Legendary does, considering how experimental a lot of their Godzilla output's been up to -1.
Well, yeah, because you had Shin Godzilla that was a modern reimagining of 54, which, since you're modernizing Godzilla, that takes many, many different turns. Then you had Singular Point, the anime trilogy, and -1 being the most traditional by far because, well, which is what makes it felt very refreshing because it is traditional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so like having like his osteoderms like combine into sort of like a tail blade would be what I'd do if I wanted Godzilla with like something spiny on his tail.
Yeah, I'd say that would be cool. I haven't really played Monster Hunter myself, but I do know a lot of the monsters, and they do look really freaking cool. And I think in terms of taking elements for a Godzilla incarnation from some of them, I think both Toho and Legendary could really get far in a design doing that.
Mm-hmm. So, let's see. I think I covered about everything I wanted to talk about the design personally. There is some undeniable flaws with it, and also the use of it, as Zim's pointed out, like that very, what we now know is an awkward shot of Godzilla looking behind him. I wish that it's really a shame because they've done better shots like that in the MonsterVerse itself, like when Godzilla looked behind him and looked upward to see the villain that was about to fall on top of him in 2014. So it's just like to see it go from that level of good execution, to that awkward shot, disappointing, but not a deal breaker for me personally.
Yeah, I'm with you. But what's next, Cody?
Well, I think we said everything that really we should be said about this, except for a little neat fact about Godzilla. Originally, he wasn't going to go with a pink/ultraviolet scheme. Originally, he was going to go for not orange, but actual red. His spines were going to be red. He was going to shoot a red atomic blast, but Adam Wingard decided to go with ultraviolet for the reasons I already said, and also because his choice of color schemes with the monsters was inspired by old action figures from the 80s I used to play with, which also used very vibrant, standout colors. So he wanted to bring that sort of aesthetic to his MonsterVerse films.
Makes sense. Oh, and Tokupunk Productions said, when you gonna get Zio Agito on streams? At some point, I want to get him on the podcast because he's a cool guy. He makes great content, but he's also very, 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 very busy. Like, that dude is worked like crazy. He's got a family he's got to take care of. He's got a hardworking day job. He's got his videos he's got to get out on time. High respect for him. He's still interested, last time I checked, in that retrospective I'm working on. Gonna see if I could get him for Gogeta, since his channel is Tokusatsu, so it would make sense. Zim's coming for raids again. Yep. But yeah, I do want to get him on
for it, all right.
I do want to get him on stream at some point, but I expect some collabs in the future. If he's still on board, of course. Last time I checked, he was, but I'll have to update him on the policy of the retrospective, since last time I told him, last time I had him on, he wasn't sure how much he was able to join for because, well, as you just said, Toku, he is the busiest Toku YouTuber, especially getting to speak with him a bit and getting to know him outside of his channel. It's like, yeah. But yeah, high respect for Zio. But can we talk about Shimo?
I was going to
Shimo,
say let's talk about Kong, but we can talk about Shimo.
Oh, and let's talk about Kong for a sec, since Kong is the other monster.
Not only that, no, he's not the other monster. Godzilla's the other monster in this case. Even though his name is used and is apparently the more marketable, this movie's going to be Kong's story for the most part, just like it was in Godzilla vs. Kong. He's basically becoming the main character of the MonsterVerse going forward, as I've said before, and I'm fine with it so long as they do it well. Again, even though I'm more of a Godzilla fan, but what can you do?
Well, I do want to say in terms of that, like, some people are saying GVK and New Empire are going to be Kong's movies. It's like, I don't entirely agree with that because, like, Godzilla's just being treated like he usually is. In Godzilla's movies, he only has bits of screen time. The most screen time he's ever had was the 90s Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla movie, and even then, he's still not on a whole lot. So it's like, Kong usually gets a lot of screen time in his movies because he has a lot of human to him, a lot of human characteristics. Godzilla still has character, but since he's less human, he's not going to be on as much. I don't expect him to be. So I wouldn't say it's any less of a Godzilla movie than it is Kong's movie. Kong's getting his expected screen time, maybe a little bit more than he does in his other movies. Godzilla's getting his expected screen time.
Yeah, but Joey, there's also a thing about the presentation, as I've been saying up to this point. This trailer clearly presents Kong like we're supposed to be following him as the main protagonist, or at least that's how I've been seen it.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. But it's just, yeah, I can't really argue that point.
But it's okay so long as they do it well, and it seems like they're doing everything they can to make it justifiable that Kong's the main character. They're showing an arc he's going through. Mainly, they're basically making him Giant Caesar from the Matt Reeves Planet of the Apes movies, which is fine by me because I love those movies even more than the original Apes series, despite loving those movies too. And on top of that, Kong is going through a physical change to let us know that he's gone through, that the times they are changing, and so is he. His beard is longer and more distinguished, which is fine with me. I think it gives him charm. He's got some grit and character. He's got his got more gray in him, becoming old man Kong, and that fur is also growing a bit puffy in them shoulders there. Holy shit! It also
this makes it look like he has a kind of like maybe a cape almost, kind of, because like anytime you have like a fur cape, it always has like a lot of puff to your shoulders. But obviously, it's his skin, but it's very much like they are doing a lot to anthropomorphize Kong, and like Punk says, Kong becomes dad of boy Kratos.
Pretty much, especially given this very almost Greek or Norse-like world the Hollow Earth is looking to be. Like a
very
goodbye.
fantasy.
It's very fantasy looking. I wouldn't say it's like Norse inspired, but it's very fantasy, like very fantasy jungle kind of.
I could see it as a map in God of War.
Yeah. Although, like, there's a lot of issues I have with how the Norse games are, but that's another thing. It's a whole other thing. It's a whole other topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of Kong's presentation as the trailer presented him?
You go first, Zim.
Like I would say, where it concerns Kong, there's always gonna be that kind of back and forth with, oh, it's kind of the Godzilla cinematic universe. No, it should be about Kong, since Kong can be more marketable as a character. No, it's neither of them. It's the MonsterVerse, so you can do whatever you want. But I think with how GVK was written and how Empire's leaks are turning out, if we continue down this path, Godzilla obviously seems to be more of a plot device rather than a character, while Kong is the central monster character that we follow, which, sure, I guess the main monster that we're going to see in the movie is a Kong-focused villain, while the other monster is essentially a MacGuffin, and that'll be fighting Godzilla, who's essentially a plot device. But I think, like, at least design-wise, I think this is one of my favorite incarnations of Kong overall.
Hell yeah.
It's I can go either way on the addition of the beard, but I think proportion-wise, he's very good. The face structure is closer to like an ape than a human. I know some Kong designs, like the DeVito Kong, in some shots will look very like Neanderthal / Bigfooty, but I think, excuse me, the like what they've done with Kong, I like. I was always kind of impartial to not wanting the axe or like Kong using actual weapons. So the Beast Glove, like, I could go without it. I think Kong is actually awesome without having specific weapons. And although I don't think we're ever going to see Kong with electricity powers again, it would be kind of cool to see him either do something with Hollow Earth energy and somehow get those lightning powers, because I'd be a sucker for them to reintroduce that, because it's not like a weapon. And that extends to like anything where it concerns like kaiju or giant monsters. Outside of mecha, I don't really like monsters with weapons. Even with like the Ultramen, I don't like Ultramen with actual like physical weapons. If they have energy constructs in the shape of weapons, that's fine, but that is my overall preference, I guess.
Blazer had plenty of those energy type weapons, by the way, which were awesome. And
I liked it. I liked what Blazer did. Like, but for example, like Orb had a lot of actual weapons. Geed had a lot of weapons. Like Jack had a lot of weapons even for his time. I just prefer Ultraman using their specium powers to create constructs similar to like Green Lanterns and stuff, rather than like them just kind of materializing weapons. I feel that's more of a Sentai thing, and I think it works better with Sentai versus like Ultraman.
Fair enough. I know
Tokubun says new gen better than Showa. I wouldn't necessarily disagree. Well, actually, no, I kind of disagree. I prefer Showa to new gen, but I say Heisei in specific.
I like them both equally.
Neo Space Frontier, Heisei, so Tiga Dynagaya will always be like my top tiers in my opinion. But
I'll mention a few top tier Ultra shows, no in specific order. Ultra 7, the original Ultra Q, Ultraman Orb, Ultraman Nexus and the Next, Ultra Galaxy, fucking Belial, come on, best Ultraman, shut up them, Tiga's cool, he is not
what?
Belial.
What about, I'm so confused, what are you talking about?
You told me before Tiga's better than Belial.
That Tiga is a better Ultraman than Belial?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still right. You can suck my nuts.
No, you can eat a dick. It's
Nope.
Belial's best.
No, Belial is okay. They're far better Dark Ultras than Belial or Belial. However you want to say it, it's fine either way. Only
I
guys
want you to know I hate you.
Tiga is amazing, and if it wasn't for Tiga, you wouldn't even have New Gen Ultra. So,
Tokupunk said Tiga is mid. You eat a dick too, Tokupunk. Tiga is great.
Trigger is not that good. Although I still do like Trigger.
I'm with
the
you. Trigger's
new
fine.
Gen Ultra shows, like between Decker and Trigger. Tiga's a boring series. No, Tiga is fine. Like
Tiga's
I can watch. Tiga's good. Guys, do not. I will hear no slander of any of the Neo Space Frontier. None of it. None of it.
But when it comes to Ultramans, yeah. When it comes to Ultra shows, Tiga's great, Nexus great, Seven's great, the original Ultra Q is great, Ultra Galaxy's great. There's a lot of great Ultra stuff out there. Oh, and Blazer's fucking great. That new show, best Ultraman's been in years, in my opinion. But,
Ultraman's nice.
Indeed. But yeah, no shit talking Tiga, Tokupunk. Just because I gave Zim shit for Tiga over Billy, Tiga's character over Billy, it doesn't mean you can trash Tiga. Tiga, both as a character and a show, is lit.
You want to give your own thoughts on Kong now, there, Joey?
Yeah, my thoughts are basically like yours. I like how he looks a bit older now, showing that he's probably had more time in the Hollow Earth than what was previously established. He's almost caveman-like in his portrayal, especially given the weapons he has now. Like, they were established in Godzilla vs. Kong. Now we're actually being able to see him with those weapons.
Yeah, to me, it's just the next evolution of his ability to use weapons. Because we saw him in Kong Skull Island use that tree as a sort of a club. And to me, the axe is just the next step of that. And the gauntlet, that's actually something I want to talk about in
Are we going to talk about the spoilers as to like what the reason for the gauntlet is, or at least what we believe at this point the gauntlet is for? Or are we not going to do that?
I was going to wait to do that to get into the actual tone and world building of the movie. But I'm fine with Kong using this the axe only because and the gauntlet only because it's another part of his development over the movies over time. He can't just be the same Kong throughout the whole series, otherwise it'll get boring and stale. They gotta find new things to do with him. And I personally like the development of his character throughout the MonsterVerse. This is honestly, the MonsterVerse Kong is my favorite incarnation of the character because I like the look of him, and I like the visual presentation, and I like how his arc's gone. He went from an orphan country. He's gone from a country orphan bumpkin in Skull Island to someone who lost his home and had it to the storm and needs to find a new one and is hoping to find family. And then in this movie, he actually does end up finding that family, but there's a big obstacle in his way. Well, actually, a few obstacles led by a bigger obstacle, but we'll get to that when the time comes. Overall, I think that so far the execution of Kong's character arc in the MonsterVerse has been very wonderfully handled, and it hasn't needed a lot of recontextualization as Godzilla's arc has needed up to this point. Yeah. So,
real quick before you say something, Joey, did Cody correct me if I'm wrong, but did you say that Kong needed the axe because it was an evolution for his character, and that if they didn't do something like that, it would just keep making more stale?
It's an option. I said it was. I was trying to say that it was an option that they could have gone with, but it's not necessarily the thing that they had to do. But it was the choice that they went with.
Because I feel like even though Kong used like tools in Skull Island, I think that in a way, him having the axe diminishes his abilities as a fighter because he needed the axe to combat Godzilla, which is fine for that movie. But I think that if you wanted a visual distinction between GVK and Empire with how you could display Kong as a character, having him ditch the axe and change his fighting style would do much more for the character, because if he's a lot older now and you can see him fight different, so instead of a lot of like grapplings and like him slamming monsters around, he's using more punches, kicks, and like using his terrain in a more tactical, almost near human way, instead of him having to use the axe to fight. I believe that probably would show a greater development of him as a fighter. And if he needed to use weapons, he can use like environmental stuff like he did in Skull Island. And I think that would overall be more consistent for the character. And I think that it would allow the animators to come up with a lot of interesting fight scenarios, in my opinion. But like, I think that there's another topic, I think, underneath like the layer to the point I'm trying to make. But I think that overall, I don't necessarily agree with the addition of him having all these weapons still.
That's
Fair enough.
I understand. You make a very compelling argument that I won't try to counteract, because it's something I understand completely. And you might end up getting your way, getting what you want anyways, if some of what I heard about the leaks is true.
Yeah, if the leaks are true, we might go towards where I'm thinking we could go. And excuse me, I am dying.
Oh no, don't die.
I think that overall, like, if the Beast Glove is sort of a transition out of weapons based on like what we know it might be used for, I think that'd be a good thing for the character.
I can agree with that.
Are we moving on to the glove, by the way?
If you want to show the picture of the glove, you can.
Go ahead. I will say I actually like the addition of the glove. A lot of people don't like it, but to me, it makes fundamental sense, because I believe it's actually a medical brace that Monarch made for him, which makes sense considering the kind of relationship this version of Kong has with humanity, especially Monarch, that they would do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, and it really does add in with the goofy Showa aesthetic this one is going for. But
I don't think it's just Showa stuff. I think they're going full-blown live-action Saturday morning cartoon, and I mean that in the best of ways.
Yeah,
and some of the worst.
But even though it's over the top, again, context is key. So, and you provided some context, so it's like, yeah, I'm glad it's there. That is the key to writing, is if it's acknowledged within the universe and nothing is necessarily contradicted, and even if it is goofy like this, and it is, and I like that type of goofiness. Like, I know some people are complaining about it, but it's like, if it makes sense, makes sense within the story, it's like, okay.
I guess like my stance is that I think that the first idea was we needed a new weapon for Kong to market, and I wouldn't be surprised if down the line we're going to see like Beast gloves for like kids and stuff. So
like Hulk hands?
Yeah, kind of like Hulk hands.
Yeah, I used to have one for the ones for the Thing of the Fantastic Four when those movies were new.
Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I think they probably were thinking, and then making sure that you saw it in the first trailer was specifically to get people talking. And I guess sure. I think ultimately a lot of people are comparing it to like the Power Glove from like Nintendo, and I think that probably the like creators didn't realize, oh, that's probably what people are gonna think of, because
I've heard the Infinity Gauntlet.
The Infinity Gauntlet too is another one I've heard, and it doesn't do the movie any favors by having people compare it to like other weapons from superhero stuff or like toys. So there is that, at least.
That is fair. Overall, I like it. I think it looks cool. And if there's nuance to why Kong gets it, it's like, okay. Now, if there isn't any nuance by the end project, and it just sort of happens, kind of like how Apex got that Ghidorah head, it looks like Godzilla vs. Kong, then yeah, that's worth criticizing. But
most definitely.
But overall, it looks cool. But looks also needs presentation if we're gonna be objective here.
I do I do wish that merchandising wasn't taken into account as much as they are in American cinema, well, American blockbusters, when making when coming to decisions about what to do with the movies. But
I mean, like they
that's
still
just
do that in Japan too, because you still have that with all of the what's it called? A lot of the ultra shows have that
and
marketing
Sentai.
gimmicks. Yeah,
Kamen
Sentai.
Rider
And
too.
Mm-hmm.
so
That's
it's
fair.
not like it's not a uniquely American thing.
True,
Yeah.
true. But
It's just capitalism.
even so, I think decisions regarding merchandising should be secondary to things that make sense for the story of the movie and whatnot.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that
yeah.
entirely. Like, for example, Sentai, Kamen Rider, and Ultraman, a lot of the time, like, there's moments in each of those shows where it's just added for the sake of it. There's no nuance to it. But a lot of the well-written Sentai, Ultraman, and Kamen Rider add a proper reason to the plot. There's acknowledgement towards it. Like, for example, in Ultraman Blazer, when he gets a new weapon, you'll notice once he grabs it, the human side of Blazer is curious. Like, he's like, oh, I gained this new ability, and there's genuine effect on the plot there. Now, there's of course merchandise going on there, but since there's proper writing and execution to present it, it doesn't matter by the end of the day.
Right on. Yeah, I'm interested in everything going on with Kong. I've really enjoyed the MonsterVerse Kong stuff up to now, as you all know, except for the Skull Island anime, which was mid as fuck. But Kong was good in that for the most part. But I'm curious to see what it'll lead to and if it'll justify making Kong the main protagonist of the MonsterVerse going forward.
Speaking of the Skull Island anime, if it is the weakest, it's okay. It's just mid. It's the weakest entry in the MonsterVerse, second going to Godzilla 2014.
We'll see. Well, I guess so.
Unless this film changes that. Please
Which
don't.
I hope it doesn't.
Because it's like, please don't even be on 2014's level. Be better than those two entries. I would also hope it's better than the other previous MonsterVerse stuff, particularly King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong, because again, as much as I love those movies, there is a lot wrong with them, speaking critically about them.
For sure, for sure. Do either of you two have any more to say about Kong in this movie?
It's going to be interesting to see Kong actually interact with I think probably Suko's like an actual like same member of his species, and if that is the case, this is gonna be the first time we've actually seen that happen, since obviously we never saw Kong interact with his quote unquote actual kid.
Right. That'll definitely be the closest we got was to him looking at his son in King Kong Lives right before he dies.
Yeah, because there's that, and then there's obviously Suko from like the original Son of Kong.
It'll also be fascinating seeing his
the original Son of Kong.
What was that?
His name in the original Son of Kong is Keiko.
Yeah,
Kiko
Kiko.
or whatever. Yeah,
whatever
Keiko.
it's called. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Kong reacts to Suko and to seeing members of his own species. Like, just think about it. He'll be like, what the fuck is this kid? Wait a minute. He looks a little bit like me. Oh, there's more of us. There is? Take me to them. Are you sure? That's why I said, okay. Goes to take him to the rest of the Kongs. He's like, hi guys. And they're like, who the fuck are you and why are you here? Why would you want to come here? And he's like, Kong's like, what's the problem? Scar King jumps in. It's like, who the fuck is in my house? Everyone's like, oh shit. I'm hyped for that.
I'm wondering now, since obviously Kong understands sign language, if we're gonna see like some like either like some form of sign language done between like Scar King and Kong, or Scar King and other like characters.
Would you want that?
I'm not sure, but like I guess like it would allow a better understanding of his character, since we'd more objectively be able to understand what it is he's actually saying and or wants. I'd have to see it and like how it's executed if that ended up being the case.
I'm with you. It would depend on execution. Up to this point, they've done enough, more sufficiently with visual storytelling up to this point with Kong, but yeah, since it's been established he understands sign and GVK, that's gotta be brought back. That can't just be ignored.
That'd be super interesting if it ended up getting ignored. That would suck, but like, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised.
It's
Ugh.
a MonsterVerse after all. It's never been peak writing.
They're peak
Un-
consistent.
Sad but true. Joey, did you have anything else you wanted to say about Kong in here?
Not really. Like, I like the design, but at the same time, unlike Godzilla, it's not a major change in his appearance. So, yeah, it's a cool upgrade from the last entries of the MonsterVerse. It's shown he's aged even more from Skull Island to Godzilla vs. Kong to now this. And, of course, the new abilities and all that are nice. There's more potential to show off Kong's human side. I'm just looking forward to it.
Right on. Then I guess we can move on. I personally want to move on to Suko, but who would you all rather talk about next?
I think since we talked about Kong, it would make more sense to go to Suko, but what about you, Zem?
I can we can do Scar King or we can do Suko. I'm fine with either or.
Well,
I don't feel like there's too much else to say about Suko, in my opinion, but if we want to, we totally can. I Suko in this case, Joey.
Okay. What do you think, Cody?
I personally could. I actually have a few paragraphs in my notes about Suko. Leave me alone. I like this kind of shit.
Okay,
so,
let's do it.
When it comes to Suko, aka Kiko, aka Little Kong, yeah, originally before I found out his name, I was calling him Kiko. Like y'all said, that was the son's name and the original son of Kong. Yeah. Is there any doubt left why one of the titles suggested for this movie originally was Son of Kong?
Yeah, because they were good. They were giving him a son, and that's what we got here. So,
well, quote unquote son. I think it's gonna be a scenario where he actually adopts Suko. Some have suggested that Suko was an offspring born from Scar King mating with one of his Kong slaves, which I guess would make sense to an extent, meaning that he's actually Scar King's son. But it makes you wonder why he ran away from Scar King the way he did to find Kong. Where's his mom at? Oh, God.
Exactly. Like you know what? Like even the name, like it's not the same name as Kiko, but it has a similar sound to it. Like say it like this: Suko Kiko.
I like the name.
Yeah, very much. You can tell it's like what it's trying to do and infer.
Yeah.
Also, kind of reminds me of Zuko from Avatar.
Let's not compare Zuko to this ugly little bastard.
He's not ugly.
He reminds me of you.
He reminds me of you. Oh, wait a minute. I actually like
flirting with me, Cody?
Shut up.
He reminds me of both of you. Dumb, stupid monkeys.
You're a dumb, stupid monkey and a half.
I am black, so yes.
That's racist, Cody.
I win. No. You activated my trap card.
I love that you made that reference.
You triggered my trap card.
What his trap card is, he's gonna put on drag.
You're a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck.
His trap card is he's gonna put on. His trap card is he's gonna put on drag, and then he's gonna try to seduce you. Then he'll be a real trap.
Pull the trigger. Sorry, we were talking about Ultraman earlier. But yeah, apparently what New Empire started out as is two separate movies. One was going to be a Kong solo movie and a Godzilla solo movie before it was decided that to sort of combine the two. Studio heads did it because they didn't think either monster could carry a movie on their own after how well Godzilla vs. Kong did, comparatively speaking. And Adam Wingard did it because, in his own words, he can't ever see those two being separated again. Sort of a slap in the face to people who want the return to solo movies, myself included. But again, it's all about presentation and execution. So we're talking about Suko, right? Anyways, I like Suko. I think his introduction makes a lot of sense. It actually gives Kong sort of a gateway into discovering his own people and also discovering the main thread of the movie, which will be Scar King. And it'll be interesting to me to see how Suko interacts with the human characters, particularly Gia. Will she try to teach him sign language? Will she be a little bit jealous that he's taking up so much Kong's time now or something like that? Or will there not be time for that? You never know. I think that Suko brings a lot of potential to the story, well, as simplistic as it's going to be. And I don't understand why people are disliking him or hating him or saying he's Minya 2.0. He's nothing like Minya 2.0. Y'all are haters.
Don't like baby monsters because they always come across as feeling like gimmicks. That'd be like
I think it depends. I think Godzilla's accomplished it a few times, particularly in the Heisei era with Baby Godzilla, for example. Little Godzilla too. Say what you will, Little Godzilla's adorable and also worked in the plot of versus Space Godzilla. And then you had Junior, all a solid progression in my opinion.
I would say like the best example would probably be what's it called? Godzilla Jr. Because I think that in that case it didn't suffer from trying to cutesify the monster too much. It was just a like a juvenile monster, nothing more, nothing less.
It fell into the trap a little bit in Godzilla versus Space Godzilla.
Yeah, because they definitely made Little more cuter than Baby Godzilla. And obviously that like works with certain audience members. Like I think like if I recall correctly, the appeal of the like adding Little Godzilla like and making him the way he was because what's it called? To appeal to like more women fans, which I'm fine with that,
Yes.
but just like I know a lot of people don't like having baby monsters because of that fact. So
Plus, Little Godzilla also worked with the tone of Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, given it was advertised as a date movie, which makes sense considering the story is basically a love story and all about forgiving your past demons and going on with stuff that can better your life. And a lot of that was through Miki's romance with Shinjo, Yuki eventually forgiving his past demon and proceeding with his life with Gondo.
mm-hmm.
Right on. So what's your guys' opinions of Tsuko?
I think Tsuko could work. I'm not huge on the design. It looks kind of... it's just ugly to me. That's very subjective, I know. But it's not very pleasant to look at. But it could work within Kong's character of being more human. Like when he first finds Tsuko, you could tell he's a little shocked to see something of his species. And I feel like he's probably gonna reject him at first, but eventually his human side is gonna make it where he takes him aboard the journey because he doesn't want Tsuko to be orphaned.
Like he was.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's what's gonna happen here.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
And use him?
I've never had a huge issue with baby monsters. I understand like the more cynical reason of adding them. I guess I just want to see how he's implemented and whether or not I feel that like the film would be better with or without him.
Right on, right on. I'd say that his role in connecting Kong to the Scar King and helping him find his people is a serviceable enough reason, but it looks like there's going to be other interactions he'll have and other uses he'll have in the story, if minor. So I'd say it's justified, at least based on what we've seen in the trailer so far.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And something that comes to mind is the scaling with Tsuko, because he almost looks as big as Kong did when he was in Skull Island, roughly the same height, which is a problem. Only in universe, only because in that movie, Kong was supposed to be a teenager. All I can figure is that his growth was stunted since he was born premature. And if you read the Kong Skull Island comic books, you'll see there's actually precedent for that, if those comics are still considered canon.
I think like overall, probably I think there's a way to make it work, but I believe more than likely they just are ignoring the fact that Kong was a lot smaller when he was a teenager, and we just have to kind of accept that. I think we could make up some world building reason as to why that is the case. But as far as I'm concerned, again, it's just MonsterVerse shenanigan, timey-wimey, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's a real shame that there's so many holes. There's so many holes in the continuity and the writing of the MonsterVerse because there really doesn't need to be. A lot of these problems could be easily fixed with a few minor rewrites here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But Whatever. It is what it is.
Who are we moving on to now, though?
Scar
I think
King,
we-
motherfucker.
Yeah, Scar King, and then we can do the mystery monster last.
Okay. Let me get the mystery monster's his penis, by the way, guys. Okay,
Jeez. Why are you so obsessed with his penis, bruh?
I know, right?
the BBC, man. BBC chocolate and vanilla.
Ew.
Cause.
But when it comes to Scar King, I'm kind of mixed. Like this shot right here, it's pretty badass. It's displaying him in a very intimidating fashion with the darkness around him. But I know ETN has a lot of dog shit takes. Like, let's be honest. But when he said "old man Scar King," he's not wrong. Like, one minute. Oh wait, let me find the proper image. Of this bald ass motherfucker.
Balding King Louis.
Yeah, like it's not very intimidating when your character. 1 minute. Let me grab it one.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think the balding was a static choice to try to do as much as they could to differentiate him from Kong physically.
Yeah, like it's not very intimidating when your lead villain's balding. It's like, my god. But it's like, I will say I do like that he looks different from Kong in areas, because if I remember correctly, Scar King is an orangutan, which
Orangutan-like.
Yeah, orangutan-like, which does bring more variety to the difference in Kong and other primate-like titans, which is cool because, again, the titans aren't just animals, they're gods. So it shows that Kong is kind of unique within himself, just like Scar King is. They're similar titans, but they're not the exact same, since, in a sense, they are one. There's only one Scar King, there's only one Kong, and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. I will say that on paper, the idea of Scar King is a really terrible, uninspired idea, because on paper, it's just basically evil Kong, which has led to criticisms that the MonsterVerse is being MCU-ified. A big criticism of the MCU was having villains that are basically evil versions of the heroes instead of going for a more diverse rogue gallery akin to Batman or Spider-Man. And I get why people would say that, but here's why I'm okay with the idea of Scar King despite hating his name. No, putting a C in front of a K where the C should be doesn't make it a better name. It's a lazy focus group name, the same way Warbats is, same way as the big one is, when we could have had Ramarak or Nazuki's. Fucking A. But in terms of the actual presentation of Scar King, I think it's actually been on point, because they always present him like he's a threat. He's mean. He looks like he's hateful. He's ugly. He looks vicious. It's like, basically, he doesn't look like he could make a friendly face if he wanted to, whereas Kong could smile and all of that. I can't imagine a smile on Scar King looking particularly friendly. Yeah, look at that. That's not a nice man.
And I will say another thing I do like about Scar King, though, which we can't really present it here since it's just images, is his roar. It not only sounds different from Kong, but dude, it's hard to describe, but something about it sounds more menacing. But that might be
the one thing I will say is that this is one of the times where Rob from ETN, his point is pretty spot on, where Old Man Louis, his roar just kind of sounds like an old man's kind of like it sounds like very like old and warbly instead of like being like really intimidating, I guess.
I think it's intimidating enough. I do agree that it does make him sound older, but I think that might have been
I think that was
intentional.
Point, yeah.
Yeah, because it's clear that this guy's old.
Yeah. Like Joey, I sent you in Discord. I sent you a few like images of chaos from Primal Rage. They're all the way at the bottom, and a few of these, like, they're not like, one's the official design and two redesigns, and I think Scar King is just a really safe design, and if they wanted like an evil Kong mirror match, there was a lot that they could have done to really amp up his like fear factor.
Yeah, I can agree with you. Like, for example, I would prefer him not to be a bald ass old man. And I've played a lot of Primal Rage before, by the way, so I know of this character. And yeah, I think they could have it would have paid to take some inspiration from this guy, which they might have because the fur does look somewhat similar.
I think that the whole movie might have taken some inspiration from the Primal Rage game, among other sources. Not to the extent that they could have, obviously, because of what Zim's showing us here, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, because let me show you. Let me put the official design on screen. Like the official design definitely looks evil because, like, look at that hairdo, for example. It differentiates him from Kong. His face has a very mean look to it with his sharp teeth, red eyes, and how his snout is proportioned.
True, but you don't want to lean too far into copying the design, only because it skirts the line between inspiration and flat out theft. Yes.
Yeah. Like I think Star King did take some inspiration here, but if I would take, like, for example, the top hairs, because this is a preference thing. Like, artistically speaking, I know what they're going for by making him bald. They're trying to make him look old, so I can't use an objective critique against that, other than speak on my personal preference. But yeah,
I mean, you can have an old person and still give them hair. Like, bald does
yeah.
not necessarily equal old.
Well,
I mean, something they could have done is, like, they could show the beginnings of him balding, like he's bald at the sides, but in the middle, there's that very Primal Rage-esque mohawk that he has growing and hanging down. They could have done something like that.
I guess the other thing too is that, like, not only, like, since he's based off an orangutan and orangutans are very, like, lanky, because he's balding and he's lanky, it gives him the impression of being like a very frail old man, kind of. Because, like, if he was like bigger than Kong and super bulky, then but bald, it would give him like kind of like a Brock Lesnar kind of like vibe if he was a big, bulky, just so happened to be bald ape monster. And like even this design right here of Chaos, like this really like leads into the horror aspect of Chaos as a character. But again, you see this character being more balding, but like since he's all like mangy looking, it doesn't give him the like the vibe of being old, just like being just kind of wrong.
I can see why they wouldn't use this design, a design like this fan art, though, mainly because the MonsterVerse are kids' movies. So...
Yeah, that's the thing, is that like since you're doing stuff for children in mind, you're always going to be limited, unfortunately.
Sad but true.
That's the one thing, is that like as much as like I think monster movies, this is my hot take, or maybe it's a cold take depending on what people say, but I think monster movies shouldn't appeal to children. They just should be able to be accessible to children, would be my big stance on it, because if you're appealing to children, you're always going to have to pull back on things. And if a monster movie ends up not being something a child can watch, it is what it is. There's a lot of creature features that are very violent that aren't for children, and I think kaiju films should be the same way.
Like Godzilla Minus One is not exactly a kid-friendly movie, for example.
Like, I mean, the first sequence on Odo Island, I was in my second showing. There were a bunch of kids like sitting near where I was sitting, and I did watch one of them almost like jump out of his seat after Godzilla appeared. And it's like, yeah, if that is one of the reactions you're going to get out of younger children, I think that's fine, because ultimately changing that scene or trying to really like compress it down to be as child friendly as possible would ruin that moment in the film.
Fair. I will say about going back to Scar King, I don't have a problem with him being lengthy like he is, because it helps differentiate him more from Kong, who apparently is more bulky and burly, as you would expect with a gorilla versus an orangutan. So even though, again, the idea of an evil Kong is uninspired on paper, it does look like there was efforts made to try to differentiate Scar King from Kong, which I can appreciate on that level. And I'm also curious to see what it's gonna be like for Kong to go up against someone who's probably smarter than him, because like I said before, Kong was the country bumpkin of his species. I'm more curious to see what he'll do against someone who knows how to make weapons and use weapons the way Scar King probably does. Someone who was educated in that way. Wait, you know what I'm saying?
You
Like
fool! I have been trained in your monkey arts by Count Dooku.
Also, I'm also something else he did to differentiate him, and something else I'm interested in is look at his eyes. It's clear he has some sort of connection, some sort of relationship to the Hollow Earth radiation / energy. So I'm curious to see how that manifests.
To be honest, that's what I thought at first, but based on the leaks we do see, I think that maybe that might have something to do with the mystery monster rather than it being Hollow Earth radiation.
Okay.
Because based on how the relationship between those two, I think that may actually be what that's tied to rather than him being Hollow Earth amped. Because a lot of people thought it may be Hollow Earth amp because we didn't know about the other monster, but since at this point we do, I think that that's more likely.
So what you're saying is what's going on in his eyes right now is a reflection, actually light from the other monster reflecting off of his eyes?
Well, no, I'm thinking it more has something to do with control. Because there is that aspect to those two, and I think that maybe they might have some kind of visual signifier on Scar King to display that outside of his weapon. So that's what I assume.
Some people have suggested that he can actually psychically control the other monster, or maybe vice versa. You think that's a possibility?
I think it's a possibility, but I do know, at least from what all the leaks have said, that he is the one in the driver's seat, and I'm inclined to agree.
How do you feel about that, personally?
I think, like, the issue being is that since you have to balance Godzilla and Kong, it ultimately, like I said earlier in the stream, it makes the other monster kind of the MacGuffin, and since Godzilla isn't really a character in the movie, he's going to be more of like the big gun plot device. I think that it does make Godzilla's character suffer, but I think that, like, had you not had Godzilla in the movie and this monster just kind of being its own thing here, that it works, but it's like it doesn't balance Godzilla and Kong out well, is what I would say.
That's fair. I'm okay with it personally, only because again, they're establishing Kong as the main character and Godzilla as a strong secondary supporting character, which I also don't think he should be, but there is precedent for that, even in Godzilla's own movies, like in versus Megalon and a little bit in versus Mechagodzilla. Like,
well, I would say, like, because in Mothra versus Godzilla, like, if we want to go through all the films, it is very much Godzilla and Mothra are kind of center stage. Even with King Kong versus Godzilla, the two are more equals in that aspect.
That's fair.
Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, I would say, like, out of all the monsters, Mothra takes center stage only because she talks to the monsters. But I would say Godzilla isn't too far behind, and Rodan's kind of the third wheel out of them. And then in Invasion of Astro Monster, it is very much Godzilla and Rodan together. Or you could also argue that Godzilla was kind of the frontrunner of those two. But again, it doesn't feel like one was sidelined for the other. And then obviously Godzilla solo in Ebirah. Mm-hmm. Then you also have Son of Godzilla, where Godzilla is still kind of a main character. Even though Minilla takes center stage, Godzilla is still very important to that film. Destroy All Monsters is that, like, one exception where you have so many monsters, but even then, like, the rallying cry is at the end of that film is Godzilla, and Godzilla is one of the main monsters in the attack on Tokyo, and he has his own little big shot with the monsters attacking the world. So Godzilla still takes center stage there. Godzilla is, I would say, the first time you really see Godzilla kind of sidelined is All Monsters Attack, but that's mostly because you're watching stock footage rather than Godzilla taking it backstage, because a lot of the film is focused around Ichiro learning from, like, Godzilla and Minya. I'd say he's a less of a strong focus in Hedorah, where Hedorah is sort of the main monster, but Godzilla still plays a larger role than he would in, like, what appears to be this movie. Godzilla and Anguirus are, like, the dynamic duo, but it's still mostly the Godzilla focus in Gigan. Jet Jaguar is, like, I would say the exception for the Showa series, where Godzilla is less the main monster focus and is mostly Megalon and Jet Jaguar, with Godzilla and Gigan coming in for support. King Caesar is the main like focus of the plot, but like again, I don't think Godzilla's too far behind there. And then Titanosaurus is obviously the final introduced monster, but Godzilla and Mechagodzilla aren't like treated as second fiddle in that aspect. And then Godzilla is the main monster focus for like all of Heisei, and then same with 2000, Megaguirus, GMK, and then the Kiryu trilogy, and then of course you have Final Wars with Godzilla just kind of going Rambo on every other monster in that series. Shin, obviously, solo film minus solo film 84, etc. It does feel like GVK and now Empire are the examples of a Godzilla film where Godzilla isn't the main focus. And actually, honestly, almost all the MonsterVerse films, Godzilla is less the main focus, and it's mostly the other monsters getting the spotlight.
I'd say it's a bit more balanced out in King of the Monsters, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, comparatively speaking, I'd say, yeah, Godzilla is much more balanced out, where 2014 is mostly the Mutos, GVK is mostly Kong, and in this film, it seems like it's going to be mostly Kong again.
Okay, when you put it like that, yeah, I get exactly where you're coming from. There is definitely a better way to use Godzilla, but unfortunately, we're not the ones making this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like what it comes down to.
Is that what we have to say about Scar King?
I don't got much else to say, TBH. So
same.
Okay.
We'll see how he does.
I think he has potential.
Mm-hmm.
But does that mean we should go on to the mystery kaiju now?
Yes, we can. I have some pictures for you, Joey, to use as well. So.
I know. I got one of them right here. And what we got is
Shimo. Or Shimu, whatever.
Yeah, Shimo, I think is like what it's called.
Shimon!
I remember when the very concept of this monster was leaked to the public. We didn't see what he looked like besides some native drawing in the Call of Duty Warzone thing. And everyone was saying sounds like a copyright safe Space Godzilla, which design wise, besides the crystallization, not really. But I do think Space Godzilla, and maybe that's just me being a Space Godzilla fanboy, because look at my profile pic, come on. I think Space Godzilla was the inspiration for the overall idea of a crystallized monster with associations with Godzilla himself. I'm not going to say what those associations are. I don't even know the entirety of it myself, but there is some association with Godzilla. There's some association with space, and he's Godzilla's rival, while Scar King is obviously going to be Kong's. So yeah, I do like that concept.
Some people have actually brought up the argument that he's more like copyright friendly Anguirus now, comparatively speaking. What do you think about that?
Design wise, maybe, but when it comes to the origin, what he is outside of his design, definitely copyright free Space Godzilla. But in terms of design, more Anguirus, since he's a 4-legged monster that walks on the ground
and can walk on too. Also,
yeah. So it's like. It's still, he's not as cool as Space Godzilla, but I overall like the design. I think it's a really cool aesthetic. They really went for, like, it has a somewhat turtle/dragon look to him.
Turtle, dragon, and horse, sort of.
Yeah. It's creative. It's one of my
definitely gives a turtle look, especially in the face.
Yeah, I actually like that about him. People have said that he looks sort of like, well, people saying this positively say he looks a little bit like a Showa era monster, not one from the Godzilla movies, but from the other movies Toho made besides Godzilla. But I'll go one better and say he kind of reminds me of a Showa Ultra kaiju. Just these weird mishmash of things put together to make its own unique thing. And in terms of visual presentation, I like that. I think I like that approach with Shimu. I think he looks cool myself. What about you, Zim?
One sec, because I want to show off like the images that we do see, at least on the toys. One sec, I'm about to send that right now. So there's that one right there, Joey, that you can pull up. And then let me grab the next one. All right, so now there's the toy version. Oh, yeah, essentially you combine both of those together. So, obviously this is kind of a mashup image that, Joey, did you do this image or did someone else do this image?
This was sent to me by Cody. I don't know if someone else did this image.
So
Cody-
actually, I just sent you 2 pictures. Do the first one for a second, because some of the design element is taken up by the toys version of it, so it kind of meshes with like my thoughts on the design.
Okay.
Yeah, so at least with here, I actually really like the face.
Has a very reptilian look to it.
Like, it doesn't look like a theropod dinosaur. It looks almost kind of like an ankylosaur, but like less a specific dinosaur species and more like a giant like reptile, which I like. The face is the best part of this render, and you can switch over to the other image because that just shows the whole body, although it's just a toy. I'll be able to get my points there.
Okay, give me a second. Okay. There we go.
So, at least from like what we see here, I feel like color scheme wise, as well as aesthetically, if this is overall pretty accurate, I would say that the the spines kind of being mostly towards the top of his back makes the rest of him look very naked. White is a really hard color to use. I don't like using it on my own designs, and it's very hard for me to like certain characters in like white and all that. And even in nature, you see like polar bears, they're mostly white with very little contrasting colors or colors that complement them. And I think that he could have done with a few more ice bits along the side of his body and like around his like shoulders and arms.
I can see that.
Especially because you see so much of it, so much on the head and then so much on the back and tail. I think that'd be like what I would have done. I know myself, I would have probably added like some spines similar to like a Kentrosaurus along like up where his shoulders are, and just like filled him out a little bit more. It feels like he's almost kind of incomplete, if that makes sense. But like out of like all the new monsters that we've seen in the Monsterverse, he's probably like maybe my 4th or 5th favorite.
Who are
So
the
far-
other ones?
Hmm?
Who are the other ones in your favorites? Top 5 favorites?
I'd say number 1 probably is Camazotz. Number 2 is probably Tiamat. Number 3 is probably Behemoth. Actually, no, not Behemoth. Behemoth is number 4 and Scylla is number 3. And then Shima would be 5.
Rock on.
Yeah.
My favorite new kaiju would be 1, Shimo, because I overall like the aesthetic. Has a very creative look with how it meshes all these creatures together. It also kind of reminds me of Crystalak from Godzilla Unleashed, which I wonder if there was some inspiration there. I wonder if Adam Wingard played that game, but not sure.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, but overall, favorite. After that would go to the Ion Dragon from Monarch. Then after that, the Ice Vark, wasn't that what its name was?
Yeah, that's it.
Which dragon you said?
The Ion Dragon, correct?
Yeah.
And then the Skull Crawlers. I always been a sucker for the Skull Crawlers. The Mutos are generic as hell.
Yeah,
I think they're fine. I think they serve their purpose well enough, but they could have come up with better designs for the Mutos for sure.
Yeah, they're okay, but when it comes to Godzilla Kaiju, this is a world with so much unique and badass monsters, and then you come up with that.
Hey, at least with Shimo, it shows that they're trying.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the Monsterverse has done it a few times because I liked all the new monsters in Monarch Legacy of Monsters, and also you had the Skull Crawlers as established. So,
the King of the Monsters, from the monsters from King of the Monsters.
The other Titans and King of the Monsters, they were all right. Like I never understood why so many people like the Behemoth. To be honest, it's just some weird looking mammoth.
Communist.
I would say, like, for myself, if I'm gonna be like the most boomery out of y'all here, in terms of like opinions on designs, I would say like the monster, like the American Monster design, I feel is the peak American Monster would be like the Griffin.
The Griffin's pretty cool.
The Griffin's awesome.
Specifically the Stan Winston design that we see that was maquetted out. Like, I feel like it combines animals in a satisfying way, and it feels like a complete design. And it contrasts with Godzilla really well, I think. And it does feel, however, that a lot of the monster designs that have been added were done by so many different people with differing design philosophies, and we're trying to add them all together. And I think that in certain places they're lacking. Scar King, I'd say, probably would be one of them for me. And then like the Mutos, I just did not care for at all.
I'm with you there.
That's me being like a character design and stuff.
Yeah, I can agree with you on stuff like that. Like Mutos, they're mid. When it came to a lot of the other stuff, Scar King, I think his presentation on a writing perspective could save the design, but we'll see.
Right on. I'm curious for how they're going to use Shimo story-wise, because we all heard the leaks by now. Well, I'll touch on them here, that apparently Shimo, or at least if not him, his species, are the point of origins for the Titans as a whole, so the rumors go, which makes me wonder, how are they going to use that? Is he actually a space monster, or did he develop naturally in the Hollow Earth? Whatever. What could it be? But if he was from space, it would be a nice twist on the relationship between Godzilla and Space Godzilla, sort of a role reversal in that case.
I guess
but not just with Godzilla, but all the monsters.
In my opinion, like when it comes to like progenitor monsters, it usually works if there's a lot of similarities in all of their designs. And then like in the case of the Monsterverse, we don't really see that. There's so many variations in species and shapes that the idea of Shimo being the origin point for all the Titans, I think it's going to be a hard sell, in my opinion. I could understand the idea of Shimo being one of the first Titans, or one of the oldest still living Titans. That I'd say makes a whole lot more sense. And I think there may be a relation between Shimo and Godzilla in some form or fashion. I could definitely see.
There kind of has to be, because if you remember, like I said, originally New Empire was two different movies, with Shimo being the antagonist of the Godzilla movie that was planned.
Mm-hmm. Like, I could understand reptilian Titans having their origin point in Shimo, but then I could totally see like the idea of like Scar King's, like his ape Titan species are what like Kong's Titan species and like other ape Titans spawned from. Like I think the Hollow Earth works better if there were multiple species that developed into the Titans, and then they spread out, and that's why you saw the diversity of species, rather than it essentially kind of being like, this is the origin point, like they're like every single Titan's like a BOW from like Resident Evil or something.
Yeah.
Right on.
Tokupunk Productions said, "God damn it, my PC crashed. What did I miss?" We gave our thoughts on Old Man Scar King. We all basically agree that the design isn't the best, but it might be. He might be executed well. As you said, now we're talking about the Cum Dragon. I do not agree that this is the lamest MonsterVerse kaiju ever. I think it is the peak in terms of original.
I think it's peak, but it's okay.
He's okay. I like it. It shows that they're at least trying to come up with better ideas for original monsters, but I still think they could have done better. But in the end, I'll be okay with it, so long as it's presented well in the movie. And again, to me, it looks like a Showa Ultra Kaiju, but in the modern day, and I mean that in the best of ways.
Yeah, like I said, the head render is I really like how the head render looks. I just want to see what the rest of the body looks like. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Right on. Here's hoping for the best.
Yep. Is that all we have to say about Shimo?
Unless there was anything you wanted to add, Joey?
Nope, I basically gave my thoughts here. I like the reptilian stare, like the stare we get on that box with how his eyes are looking forward and how his mouth is presented. Looks a lot like an iguana. So it's like, yeah, there's definitely more. There's definitely a lot of creativity there from dragon, turtle, lizard, all that. So it's like, yeah, I like Shimo. Is it peak Godzilla kaiju? No. Peak original MonsterVerse? In my opinion, yes.
Here's my question. At Wingard inferred that the Scar King and the Shimo together are going to be the biggest threat the MonsterVerse has seen thus far. My question is, even together, how are these boys going to compare to King Ghidorah? Don't be lying to me now.
I think like the one thing, this one point that I'm maybe stealing from Pyro Tyrant, if the leaks are true, then the Scar King has already accomplished his goal before, which was the Ice Age. So if that is true, then we know for a fact that Scar King has done what he's wanted to in recent history once, and do it again. If that's true, by that logic, you could also say that the mutas as a species have done similar, but in the case of the mutas, we do see they have not done the actions of their predecessors. So you can't really say that, because other mutos have caused mass extinctions, that applies to these mutos. Although the threat can be inferred, it's not the same as this is the same guy who's done this in the past.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, actually, Chocopunk brings up an interesting point. It's like Toriyama coming up with shit after Frieza. I will say this: Cell as an enemy fit really well. Post Frieza,
yeah,
I would say design wise, he's the best post mainline DBZ enemy. I'm not as big a fan of Majin Buu as I am Cell, but like after Frieza, Cell like visually is distinct, unique, and he served the story really well. I think Buu was a misstep. But then if we're including the movies, I would say like Cell and Broly were both very really good designs, cooler even though like it's essentially another Frieza. But his fifth form helps like make him unique in that aspect. So like I can understand the sentiment where it feels like after the most famous Godzilla enemy, we're getting a bunch of OCs that like are, they're so dangerous, guys. Trust me. I definitely can understand the sentiment, though.
This is something I also want to respond to since I missed it earlier. Tokapunk said Netflix Avatar gonna be ass. That's for another podcast, but the crew have said some really concerning stuff that has me questioning their media literacy. The trailer looked good, but after what they said, that's worthy of a podcast.
We'll see about that. Does anyone have anything left to say about Shimo or Shimu, whatever?
Not me.
No.
Like I said, I like it.
I've pretty much said my piece on that too. I will say one more thing because I think we should start wrapping up since we've been here for over 2.5 hours.
It's funny how you're like, we should wrap it up because it's been 2.5 hours. Me, that's light work.
Yeah.
Well, I got other stuff I do besides this podcast though. So
I feel you.
I'm
ragging on you. I'm ragging on you.
Feel free. Joey does it all the time because he's an asshole.
Yes.
But one more thing I'll say. Apparently, the Death Jackals from the Kong comic books, the MonsterVerse comic books, are going to be in this movie too. We see what looks like them chasing Kong across.
Those are actually a different monster entirely. They're like hyena somethings. They have like another like weird kind of like name, some of like warbats and stuff. Yeah. So those aren't Death Jackals.
They should have been the Death Jackals.
Those would be giant Death Jackals then.
Oh, fair enough. Never mind. Maybe they're an offshoot of the Death Jackals, or the Death Jackals are an offshoot of them.
Yeah.
Yes. Kind of like what I'm wondering what the relationship is between the Eevee on Skull Island and the Eevee we find in the Hollow Earth.
That probably would keep us here for like a whole another hour. So
yeah, I know. That's why.
The thing I will say is, let's see what they retcon, and once the film is over, I'll be able to give more thoughts because I have no opinion at the moment.
I do want to tackle one thing that does concern me about this movie though before we leave.
What's that?
The runtime. Like the movie is said to be 1 hour and 54 minutes, which is like, I know Godzilla has tackled, like most Godzilla movies aren't 2 hours, okay? But I do not trust Adam Wingard. Godzilla vs. Kong felt like it was an adaptation of a very long book as it tried to stuff so much lore into its runtime. Like, it was a very simplistic movie. Like, the characters were the Fukuda-style simplicity of cast, opposed to the more dramatic side we got in King of the Monsters. but they still don't work because they're one-dimensional. Like, they're entertaining enough, but Team Godzilla, for example, they don't have any nuance to their dynamic. They're just working with each other, and because they share the same goal. Nothing has really changed from start to finish. And then at the end of the movie, nothing's really changed. They released Team Kong. There's not much dynamic there. Like, yeah, their opinions on Skarsgård's character changes a bit, but still, there's
what's
no
it called?
nuance to that
Skarsgård.
change. Yeah.
If I may,
But it's like,
if I may, Joey, I think that the runtime will work better for this movie than it did for GVK, because one of the biggest flaws with GVK was that Adam Wingard had a hard time reconciling what he wanted to do with the movie versus what needed to be done with a lot of the continuity that was carried over from the previous movie, because Adam Wingard's made it abundantly clear that he's more interested in creating and developing his own ideas more than carrying over ideas from other creators, which I don't think is the approach you should go with. If you're going to be part of a bigger universe, you need to be able to reconcile what you want to do versus what's best for the overall universe.
Yeah, if you can't keep your unit, like your part of the universe, consistent with everyone else's, because you're a creative and like you want to tell your own stories, you don't deserve to be part of a like $1 million multimedia franchise. Give it to someone else who can keep their ego in check and actually do their job properly. As for this film, it's essentially 114 minutes in terms of screen time. That makes it essentially 6 minutes under the usual superhero film, which is usually about 120. And then obviously you got some films that are going to be about like 150, 180 or so. Those are going to be more longer running films, with like the average film coming in about 90 to 100 minutes. I would say in this case then, I still think probably 2 hours, like a flat 2 hours, would have been better, because in that case, you'd probably have more room to explain things. I think this is going to have the same issue GVK and BVS had when it came to like how much they wanted to show off in terms of like bloat of information. And I think that's a big concern I'm going to see.
Yeah,
I actually think it'll be handled a little bit better in this movie, only because this is all what Wingard wants to do. He doesn't have to try and reconcile what he wants to do versus what needs to be done much.
I guess,
speaking. So I think,
remember too, I also brought up BVS, and BVS was done by the same guy who did Man of Steel. So it's not like Snyder in that case had to follow off someone else's work. He was following off his own work. And if New Empire is the same thing, I feel that we may run into a similar problem where there's a lot that wants to be done and there may not be enough time to do it. That is like my big concern.
Yeah, same here. Like, as Cody said, there's a chance, like, maybe that was the reason why Godzilla vs. Kong's runtime was basically too stuffed for its own good. Because, again, while there's a lot of the characters are simple of that movie, since it's trying to do so many different things at once, nothing really got proper justice. And I love Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a fun movie, but the pacing is a mess.
I will say there are other problems with it besides that, but that's one of the main problems in my opinion. Then there's a bunch of other small problems, like the convenience of the Kong Temple just happening to be under Hong Kong, and Godzilla's like, what the fuck's going on underneath me? And then drills that hole. Cool as it is on the surface level, but when you dive into it, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that was a little convenient.
It becomes it's like cool spectacle, but then it raises so many questions.
Yes. At first you're like, yay! Then you're like, hey, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, I've accepted the monster versus flawed, and even if this, I'm pretty sure, like, this one's still going to have a lot of flaws to it, though the test audience is actually praising the characters of this one does give me some hope. And no, don't go in with the expectation that they're going to be drama. Like, again, this is Fukuda-style simplicity. It's not a drama movie like Godzilla Minus One. It's an action fantasy. So expect them to be fun, but if the characters are better, like the test audience say, they'll have nuance, and there will be some growth in their dynamic.
I'm hoping it's going to be the best that it can be. It seems like it has the potential to be, at least in my opinion, even though there's room for improvement. But here's hoping for the best.
Yeah, I hope it is. And even if it turns out to be as flawed as the other entries, it's like, hey, I'll still enjoy it, but I'll acknowledge how flawed it is.
For sure. I've had notes on every MonsterVerse entry so far. I don't expect this one to be any different.
Yeah. The only reason, like I said, I have a bit more hope is the test audiences, according to Trevor and Gorzard, have liked the characters this time, but I'll be the judge of that. But still, that runtime is concerning. I'm afraid, just like Godzilla vs. Kong, it's going to try to do so much in such a small length. It's going to come out messy. Because, like, most Godzilla movies aren't 2 hours, of course. But here's the thing. Most Godzilla movies don't try to bite off more than they can chew with their runtimes.
I would say, like, it's going to be a wait and see kind of game here.
Yeah.
This is the litmus test, I think, for where we want to see the MonsterVerse go. Now that we have someone who's doing a back-to-back directing, whether or not he's going to be improving on the story. And with the test screenings, my concern is, are they saying they like the characters because they don't get in the way of the monster fights that the normies want? Or are they saying, oh, wow, these are actually like good characters with interesting arcs? Because like, I think there's only 3 characters that are getting carried over, maybe 4, if the rumors about Madison also being in the movie are true.
Which I don't think
Bernie's there, Gia's there, and then Eileen are there. And those are the only people that are getting carried over. And I think like the biggest issue the MonsterVerse has always ran into is that they don't have leading humans, which they should have. I think that'd be, I think actually, not to drag this out again, but if you were able to get Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell into Godzilla, I'm sorry, but I would have rather have seen Wyatt carry the MonsterVerse as the leading human character in some role, rather than us switching between so many different human characters that we don't get attached to as much. Because obviously Wyatt, outside of US Agent, isn't in a whole lot that he needs to be like taken away from. So he could have worked, especially since like both him and his dad do a really good job, even though they're playing the same character. They both do they do the best job out of that show. And that's like a MonsterVerse hindsight thing for me, I guess. But
yeah, like they feel like the same character, and you know that Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell were discussing behind the scenes how they were going to make it feel like the same guy, because they do.
Yeah, and I guess like had it been a situation where instead of if you had a similar dynamic between the Ford father and son, but replace them with the Russell actual father and son, and then changed around 2014, and you would have been able to keep one of the Russells, I think you would have had a much stronger foundation for the MonsterVerse, at least in the present era, because obviously we would have to have gone back in time for Kong. But that's just one thing, at least like I'm thinking of now, like we're looking at the MonsterVerse in hindsight and everything that's happened since.
Yes. Now, something I also want to say, a lot of people are using these movies as action films to try to defend their flaws. Like, I do agree we should not compare these to Minus One because different goals, but we should compare these to the Godzilla movies they're trying to mimic. Like King of the Monsters, we should compare to the mid-Showa era, like in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Like Adam Wingard, we should compare to Fukuda's movies. And you know what? Fukuda did a better job with characters, because I know I used this example before, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. The characters in that movie have nuance. Like Takodata's character, he lets those people on the ship simply because he knows that isn't his ship, and he realizes they're probably in a tough situation just like he is, and deep down he's a good person. And due to Takodata's performance when they're on the island, while nothing's directly stated, you could tell from his knowledge that he's been to places to get his crime done, and throughout he gradually learns from his mistake. Again, that's a simple arc for an action movie. It doesn't take itself that serious. It's not deep and dramatic and complex, yet the characters have nuance. They are fun. They grow in a simple way that doesn't need to be overly complex. The MonsterVerse,
and they serve the plot very well.
Yeah, exactly. They serve the plot very well and are the main reason to watch Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, because the monster stuff in that film is not great. especially since Godzilla looks like ass.
I think
But
like another thing to consider too is that if we're going to use sea monster as an example, Fukuda did not have as much of a bloat of media that was referential to other media, which was referential to other media, like we have now, since we're so far down the line with how much media has been put out there. In his case, he was focused primarily on spy films like Bond and a lot more like pulpy action adventure type of stories. And if you try to say from that basis that Fukuda was trying to mimic a Bond film, outside of an evil organization, Takarada's character doesn't act like a Bond of any sort. Like you could compare him to any of the Jason Bonds, and he isn't that at all. None of the characters really act like characters similar to a Bond film, whereas it does feel like in the Monsterverse films that they're mimicking characters from other recent films in order to cash in on the marquee value of that archetype rather than trying to actually create characters, it seems.
exactly, which is the problem.
Which is why I don't think that it's fair to say that Wingard is trying to mimic the Fukuda films, because I don't even think that that's where his mind is at the moment. I think he's just thinking, oh, I can do a fun action film with Godzilla and Kong, and we'll maybe have humans, but we'll have an ancient civilization, and like the monster is like the super uber powerful creature. And I think that's going to probably limit the writing, but we'll have to see. It's the same thing as I don't think Doherty was specifically trying to like remake or emulate Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, even though he had the exact same monster lineup. Like those films are very different from one another.
Oh, they were actually. I want to say something about that. Originally, Rodan was supposed to join Mothra and Godzilla in teaming up to fight Ghidorah at the end of the movie, but Doherty made the decision very intentionally to make that not happen because it had already happened in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. So, in some ways, the Godzilla movies of the past do sort of set the precedent for what the Monsterverse has to follow up on.
Yeah.
Well, I say they set a precedent, but I don't think there's as much of a precedent as I think we like to believe there is, because obviously the Godzilla films are working off a legacy, but I think that sometimes we get lost in the weeds in terms of where that direct legacy is coming from, I'd say.
No, I do want to say, reason why I brought Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster wasn't to directly say there was an inspiration, but more so to state that it's like the mid-show of films like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and such. It takes itself fairly seriously and has drama, but also tries to be a little bit more lighthearted than some previous entries. It goes a little bit more fantasy than them, but that's what I'm saying. I wasn't saying I was trying to emulate it, but Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, of course, does it better.
I guess, but you could also then say that that's just the cycle of the franchise, where you get the the first film of every major like era incarnation is always the super serious one. It is then followed by another film which doesn't take itself as seriously as the first one and introduces more fantastical elements. And then as the franchise goes along, even if they're still making money and financially like successful in terms of a monetary standpoint, their profits are shrinking a little bit, and that's when you see the turn towards a more kid-friendly approach, which is what you saw in the Showa era. You did see a little bit of that in the Heisei era, and then you did not see it as much in the Millennium series because of the Kiryu duology, but you really see it with the choice to use Kitamura and his ideas in Final Wars, and now we're seeing it with the Monsterverse. The Reiwa era does seem to be the only series so far that has bucked this trend, and that's also because we're not seeing direct back-to-back incarnations of Godzilla and a follow-up to stories in Japan.
Now, I do want to say, well, reason why Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is a little bit more lighter is because Kinsho Yamashita, I believe his name was known for directing love stories and romance movies, which is what Space Godzilla has turned out to be, and that's one of the reasons why it vibes so much. And
well, I guess, but then also think about it in the sense of, even though you could say that, then it is a massive coincidence then that the trends and tones of both the Showa and the Heisei films at that period drifted in the same direction, and then that would be played up upon in a similar manner in the series that would follow the Heisei era, and seems to be coming true once again with the Monsterverse. At that point, that's
Yeah.
4 coincidences. And then
Yeah.
less, they were just picking someone who just so happened to be more lighthearted.
Now, I also want to say, in terms of Winger not trying to be Jun Fukuda, even if that isn't his intent, I still think it's valuable to make the comparison, because when you go back to Jun Fukuda, it's a good example of how characters can be simple and not be overly dramatic, while still having nuance and growth.
There is definitely comparisons to be made, but whether they were intentional or not is definitely up for debate.
Yeah.
Again, it requires more time to like really cover that topic.
Yeah, but we've been here for 3 hours.
But yeah,
We haven't been here for 2 hours and 49 minutes. You lightweights.
I was rounding it out, asshole.
Yeah, well, what's it called? I am a partial logman, so you can't round around me.
Log these nuts.
But even if he's not trying to be,
I ain't gay, so that's your thing, okay? You
But
and
even if
Joey go
he's-
do that.
but even if he's not trying to be Jun Fukuda, the point stands that MonsterVerse shouldn't try to be -1, but if they want to do their simplicity properly, look back on what made previous simple entries in the franchise work.
I think I think that there will be a reaction if New Empire fails at the box office. There might be, because a lot of what they've been doing with MonsterVerse lately has been very reactionary decisions they've made, and I don't see that trend going away anytime soon. So if New Empire does fail, you might take a look at the praise and attention that -1 is getting and think, how can we get on that? And they might take the right cues from -1. They might take the wrong ones. And yes, there are wrong ones that we could also talk about, but we'd be here for another long while. But I would not be opposed to them going back to a more serious direction if the MonsterVerse does continue. I don't know if it will. It's possible. We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, all I'll say is that when it comes to what people really are receptive to, fans and normies alike, what I've always wanted for years came true with -1, a serious, like near period piece Godzilla film that takes itself really serious, keeps Godzilla pretty basic with only small minor additions, but keeping everything overall rather conservative and traditional, but just a well-written story, well implementation of Godzilla. And look at how well -1 did. And I think
it's so great.
Again, there's the only thing I can say is I feel vindicated. -1 is still no Shin. No, -1 is better than Shin. I'm sorry. That is something I'd probably have to do a video on why -1 is better than Shin. I think Shin is good. I just think -1 does things a lot better and is just a lot more able to be received. Like, it's a lot more accessible as a film compared to what Shin is trying to do. That is like my what I'd say.
I want to say something quick. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's right to compare the two, because even though both are modern reinventions of the original Godzilla, they're both drastically different ones. Like, since Shin is what if Godzilla was made today, that changes the message entirely to something much more philosophical and politically based. And what we're following as a result isn't personal people like -1, but political people. So how the characters has an entirely different checklist than the characters in -1. I say this thing we could really compare, and then when it comes to -1's case, like I said, the characters are personal people, so what makes them good is different than what makes Shin good. Now, is -1 more accessible to people outside Japan than Shin? Yeah, but the thing is, I don't think that makes it better. Mainly because it's like Ono wasn't making a movie to try and be accessible to a worldwide audience. Ono and Higuchi, they were making movies that, from what their vision was, and it turned out as great as it could be. Now, it is valid to prefer one vision over the other, but what makes them good is very different for the most part.
I think overall most of that is kind of superfluous, because when it comes to how -1 is shot, it is choosing to have certain scenes done a certain way. It is choosing to have its themes expressed the way it is. And I think that you could have a lot of what is done in not -1, in Shin without having it shot the way it was shot. And I think a lot more people probably would have been more receptive to it. I think the same thing goes for how they chose to implement Godzilla in terms of his character, or in terms of what he looks like, and the transformations and the like. And I think that ultimately those choices do make Shin a far less approachable film versus Minus One, where I feel that the themes and how those themes are expressed in Minus One are done in a way that is far more closer to character archetypes and classical stories, in a way that is more resonant with people in general than it is with Shin. Because
Well, I think when it comes to being approachable, like, yeah, it is more approachable outside Japan, of course. I think in Japan, Shin really
well, no,
resonated.
I think sure, but like I think that even if like a similar film to Shin was done in America and then imported overseas, and the same, and then you saw something else in the same franchise as this hypothetical I am making, but done more like Minus One, I think it would be the same regardless. I don't think that it being more receptive in Japan changes it. Like locality wise, you could place these two films in any franchise and then have them be in any country, and my point remains the same.
Well, like, the thing is, something can be more approachable, but I don't think that makes it better on a critical sense, because not all visions are made to be very approachable. Like Dark Souls, that's not a very approachable game. Like, only like it's going for a niche demographic, and yeah, it won Elden Ring won an award and won multiple awards actually, but it's still not as approachable as say Call of Duty. Call of Duty is about as approachable
I'd
as it
say that's a
gets.
bad example too. Like I would say a better example probably would be something to the like the idea of Skyrim versus Elden Ring in that sense,
Yeah,
where
like that doesn't mean
um
Skyrim's better
no,
than
that's not the
Elden
point I'm
Ring.
making. Well, what I am saying though is that what you see done in Skyrim and the choices it's making are not the best choices that could have been made for the story it's trying to tell. Versus with Elden Ring, what it is trying to do does it far better, and therefore creates a far more cohesive product at the end. Because I'm not trying to say that Skyrim should emulate Elden Ring, and I'm not saying Elden Ring should emulate Skyrim. I think another example, if we want to keep things within the same franchise, is Morrowind versus Skyrim. Although there's a lot of things people will like about Skyrim because it is a newer game and there's far more quality of life features that the normie is accustomed to, there is a lot more things that are far deeper but also more important to the idea of an RPG that Morrowind has that Skyrim chooses to forego.
Okay, well, that kind of adds to my point there that more approachable doesn't mean better, because Elden Ring is not as approachable as something like Skyrim. Someone
Yeah,
can
no,
start
no,
off.
but that's still like I'm not saying that that just because something is more approachable does not necessarily mean it's better. I am saying, however, that something that is within the keeping of the aesthetic and the ideal of a product is what's important. And I think that Minus One is able to take its idea of Godzilla and form its story in a way that is just overall better to what Godzilla is trying to do versus what Shin is trying to do within the confines of political satire versus Minus One's themes of world trauma and like found family and all that.
I can't really agree with that. I think both nail what they're trying to go for very well. Hideki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, wonderful directors, as is Takashi Yamazaki.
Let's just agree that both Shin and Minus One are great movies.
Again, it's something that it would need more time to go over. And we're coming close to the wire for these youngins and not longmen like myself.
I got you
Cody's older
Longman
than
right
you,
over
bro.
here.
Cody's older than you, bro.
I mean like longmen in the sense of people doing long live streams, not actual age.
Okay, gotcha. This actually turned out longer than I was expecting it to be, because most podcasts of mine are just over an hour. Sometimes
There was a lot to talk about here.
As well as you also brought me on to, so I'm always going to check out the length, naturally.
But yeah, before we go, I want to say next podcast, I'm considering doing one on the Last Airbender series coming and discussing how that could turn out. Would you guys be down for that?
Possibly. I'll see. I wasn't really planning on watching the new Last Airbender
Well,
thing.
not
but-
watching it, but our predictions for it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Why not? Maybe.
Yeah,
We'll see.
like
I'll
the-
see how I'll see like my schedule and all that, of course.
Yeah, like the predictions, like for example, the concerns, like the crew saying that they fixed some of Sokka's behavior while missing
Wait,
the
what?
line of his arc.
Whole
yeah.
other stream.
But yeah, that said, I'm interested in New Empire. I hope they.
I'm
fix
getting
the-
on that stream.
Yeah, I hope they fix a lot of the other monsters' flaws. I doubt it, especially with the runtime, but we'll see. If not, it's still going to be fun, especially in the movie theater. But I'm looking forward to it. Your guys' final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see kind of where it goes.
You, Cody?
I'm interested in it. It honestly looks fun to me. Obviously, there's gonna be, again, like I keep saying, there's gonna be notes, but that's to be expected with every MonsterVerse film. Hopefully, the positives continue to outweigh the negatives, at least in my opinion. If so long as the positives outweigh the negatives for me, I'll be good.
Agreed. Like, that's basically how the MonsterVerse been in a nutshell. Because King of the Monsters, very flawed fucking movie, but what it does right makes it a really good experience overall. Same with Godzilla vs. Kong. And definitely with Monarch, in my opinion. But anyway, and Skull Island. But that said, that was it for this episode. Please comment your thoughts down below, and also join the Discord server if you haven't already, so Cody can groom you.
Just ended already. I gotta use the bathroom, god damn it.
But that said, this is Gojin the Makai Phantom, leaving the building.
To suck balls.